My mom sent a $10,000 check to control me. I burned it on my wedding night while she hid in the woods. My mom sent a $10,000 check to control me. I burned it on my wedding night while she hid in the woods. My name is David. I'm 31, and I've spent the most of my adult life learning to shrug off comments that feel more like paper cuts. Small, sharp, and hard to heal. I come from a family that enjoys parties but not people. At least not for individuals like myself. You know the type. Families who base your worth on Instagram likes and compare your life milestones like a scoreboard. I was never the winner. My sister Brooke, on the other hand, is the current MVP of our family highlight reel. Blonde, loud, and impeccably curated, she got engaged at 23, married at 25 in a 3-day ceremony at a vineyard, and has been giving themed baby showers for her children like she's auditioning for a lifestyle magazine. Me? I was a late bloomer. The quiet one. This is the maybe he's just not into commitment type. Every time I brought a girlfriend home, it became a series of subtle interrogations disguised as conversation. So you're okay with his job? You know he still rents, right? Oh, you met on an app? That's cute. Still, I showed there for every birthday, holiday, and christening. I sat at the folding tables, smiling as they forgot to put my name in the group photos. I brought gifts, which they did not open in front of me, and made nice conversation while being reminded that I was the last single person left. The hardest part, however, was Brooke's wedding. I recall arriving early in a respectable suit, nothing flashy, but neat, and being stopped at the door by one of the planners with a clipboard, who asked whether I was David, the +1. I wasn't even on the seating chart. When I located my seat, it was at the overflow table, alongside the groom's distant cousins and a few college roommates who didn't know where to sit. During her address, Brooke remarked, "To everyone who made today beautiful, you know who you are, and you're sitting right here in front of me." I was not. I was 3 tables back, near the restroom line. Brooke called me away later that night, while everyone was dancing and cutting the cake. She was tipsy, beaming, and full of self-satisfaction. "You know, Danny," she remarked, waving her wine glass like a scepter. "Some people just aren't wedding material. But it's okay. Not everyone needs the spotlight." She chuckled and kissed my cheek as if it were a praise, not a stomach punch. I smiled. I always grinned. But that night I returned home and did not speak with her for 6 months. Fast forward 5 years. I met somebody. Her name is Laya. She is calm when I am nervous, assertive when I am hesitant. And she looks at me as if I am enough. Not someone who needs to be polished or explained away. We had dated for 3 years before I proposed. Quietly. There's no fanfare. Just the 2 of us on a walk overlooking the lake. She cried, agreed, and then asked the question I had been dreading. "Will your family be there?" I paused. Not because I didn't want her to meet them, she had already, but because I knew what inviting them would entail. The same jabs, backhanded compliments, and performative hugs. I assured her we would think about it. When we first started planning the wedding, I kept putting off finalizing the guest list. Laya noticed. "Is it really that complicated?" she inquired one evening when highlighting vendors in a wedding magazine. I told her the truth. I told her about Brooke's wedding, the statement, and how my family always treated me like a supporting character in their show. She listened. She did not pass judgment. She simply took my hand and murmured, "Then maybe it's time you write your own story." Something in me shifted. Not out of rage, not yet, but clarity. I realized I'd been damaged for years by individuals who didn't even recognize the damage. They didn't hate me, they simply did not regard me. And I was done purchasing a ticket to a table where I was not welcome. We chose a site upstate that was not ostentatious but beautiful. Rustic cottages. Fairy lights hung between the trees. A clearing for the ceremony that offers a view of the hills. It felt like us. We kept our guest list short. Laya's friends, a few of mine, her parents, a number of mentors and co-workers who had become like family. I pondered adding Brooke. I actually did. I even stared at the blinking cursor next to her name on the spreadsheet. But then I remembered the smile, the restroom table, and the "not wedding material" comment, and I deleted it. I'm not angry. At peace. And then I removed the rest of them too. My mother, who always neglected to mention me in family updates. My father, who called once a year to remind me of his pride in my sister's success. And my brother-in-law, who made passive jokes about how I finally caught up. We sent out invitations. All of them. None of them ended up with my family. The backlash did not occur quickly. I imagined they expected I'd just do what I always did. Be quiet, be late, and be grateful for any place at the table. But when Leah shared the save the date photo, her hand on my chest with the text, "Can't wait to say I do in the hills with the people who truly matter," everything went crazy. Brooke was the first to text. "Wait, you're getting married?" Then another one. "No invite?" Then one that just said, "Well?" I did not respond. My mother called 3 times the next morning. I left one voicemail. "David, this isn't how families do things. Please call me." My father emailed. Who actually does that? The subject line read, "A disappointment." I did not open it. Then Brooke sent the big one. "You're really excluding your whole family after everything we've done for you? Fine. But don't come crying when you need something later. Have fun playing husband to your little boho girlfriend. Must be nice to finally feel important." I stared at the message for a long time. I didn't respond. I did not need to. For the first time in my life, there was nothing to explain. A few days after the text storm, I received a call from my Uncle Ray, the only relative I'd ever considered trustworthy. He's my mother's older brother, a retired electrician with a sharp tongue and a heart that appears when you least expect it. We hadn't communicated in a while, so I responded mainly out of curiosity. "Hey Danny," he murmured, his voice gravelly, as if he was still waking up from a nap, despite the fact that it was midday. "Listen, I know I probably shouldn't get involved, but your mom's been going around telling people you're having some kind of mental breakdown. Says Lia's got you isolated or something. You okay?" I laughed. I actually laughed. "Uncle Ray, I'm fine. I'm more than fine. I just didn't want the people who spent years making me feel invisible to sit in the front row of my wedding like they earned it." There was a long delay. Suddenly. "Good. About damn time." I blinked. "Wait, what?" "Kid," he replied. "You think I didn't see it? Every Christmas you'd show up with gifts for their kids and they'd act like you were the mailman. Every time you brought a girl home, they made her feel like a charity case. And don't even get me started on what Brooke said at her wedding. I told your mother that was out of line. She said, 'David's not the sensitive type.' That's when I knew she stopped seeing you as a person and started seeing you as an ATM. It struck me harder than I expected. Not the insult, but the fact that someone, anyone, had noticed. I just wanted a peaceful wedding," I explained quietly. "And you are going to have one," he responded. "You earned it. I'm not calling to guilt you, Danny. I'm calling to say thank you. For finally standing up. They're losing it not because you hurt them, but because you stopped letting them hurt you." That night I told Leah what he'd said. She simply placed her arms around me and muttered, "I'm so proud of you." But the messages continued rolling in, from cousins I hardly knew, Brooke's husband, and even my mother's church buddy, who once inquired whether I was the artistic one, because evidently being single and quiet equals to painting portraits in the attic. Each message has an own flavor. Some were veiled guilt trips, while others were outright rants. But they all came down to the same toxic stew: how dare I deviate from their narrative? Then followed the group message. Yes, a full-on nuclear family group text that had been inactive for years suddenly flared up like a Christmas tree. My sister started it. Just wanted everyone to know Danny's getting married and didn't invite his family. She included a screenshot of Lia's save the date. My mother joined in with, "We're all just heartbroken. It's like we don't even know who he is anymore." Then my father, with his customary emotional finesse, "He's always been selfish. We just didn't want to admit it." I stared at the thread for around 10 minutes. Not because I wasn't sure what to say, but because I knew exactly what not to say. I quit the group chat without saying anything. That's when things turned serious. Brooke, unable to let go of the spotlight she believed I had stolen, went online. She didn't mention us explicitly, but she did put a mysterious remark over a photo of herself in a bridesmaid dress. "When your little brother throws a wedding but forgets who helped raise him. Fake family that you know class." That one gained traction. Her friends made comments such as, "Families can be the worst," and, "You're such a saint, Brooke." Some even tagged me directly. I did not respond to them either. But then Lia's mother, bless her, joined the chat. She commented, "Interesting take, especially since I've watched Leah and David pay for everything themselves, plan everything themselves, and support each other without asking a soul for a dime. Seems like they know exactly who their real family is. That comment received more likes than Brooke's post. Now this is where things started to get odd. A week before the wedding, I received a card in the mail. There was no return address, but I immediately recognized the handwriting as my mother's. Inside was a 3-paragraph letter written in blue ink. The first paragraph was an emotional guilt trip about how she carried me for 9 months, stayed up with me during fevers, and always gave her all. The second paragraph devolved into veiled scolding. How family is something you can't avoid, how I was embarrassing myself in front of the extended family, and how I needed to reconsider the image I was creating. And the final paragraph, that was the kicker. If you marry this girl without inviting your family, don't bother coming back. Don't call when you need help. Don't expect us to welcome you at Christmas. Actions have consequences, David. I carefully folded the letter, returned it to the envelope, and tucked it into the drawer next to the old RSVP cards. I didn't show Leia straight away, not to protect her, but because I didn't want her to bear the burden I had already spent years learning to bear. I got up earlier than intended on the wedding day. The air was cold, and the sky was overcast in a wonderful, soft, photographic way. Leia was getting dressed in another cabin, so I got a moment to myself. No noise, no buzzing phone. Just the sound of wind through pine trees and the aroma of something new beginning. Then my phone lit up. A new number. I almost disregarded it, but something compelled me to respond. It was Brooke. "I just want to know why," she exclaimed immediately. "No greetings. Why would you do this to us? To me? After everything?" I sat on the porch's edge. "You really don't know?" "No, I don't. This is the most vindictive thing you've ever done. Not inviting your own family? You've humiliated us. People are asking questions. They're wondering if something's wrong with you." I let the silence stretch. Then I said, "Brooke, you told me I wasn't wedding material. That I didn't belong in the spotlight. You made me feel small for years. And now that I'm finally happy, you're upset I didn't hand you a front row seat to it?" "You're overreacting," she exclaimed. "It was a joke. God, you're so sensitive." There it was. The term I'd heard all my life. "I'm not sensitive," I replied calmly. "I'm just done." She began to speak again, but I hung up. And then I shut off the phone. By the time the guests arrived, I felt better than I had in years. The music played. Soft laughing permeated the air. And one by one, folks who decided to be in my life appeared, radiating joy. As I went behind the trees, waiting for my cue to walk down the aisle, the coordinator raced up to me, wide-eyed and breathless. "There's someone at the gate." I raised an eyebrow. "Who?" She paused. "Your mom. And your sister. And I think your dad's parked across the road. They're not on the list, but they're saying it's a family emergency." I glanced at her, my heart beating steadily. Then I smiled. "Tell them the guest list is final." Then I walked down the aisle. The ceremony itself was everything I hadn't realized I needed. No flower walls. There's no drone footage. No 6-piece string quartet. Just close pals, loving glances, and vows made while surviving storms together. When I saw Leia strolling toward me, her hair braided with small wildflowers and that calm, brilliant smile, I realized how far I'd come. Not just from the awkward child at the back table, but also from the man who used to go to great lengths to be tolerated. I didn't think of my family at all during the ceremony. Not once. My hands didn't shake, my voice did not falter. The weight of their absence did not seem like a loss. It felt like there was enough space to breathe, to stand up straight, and to finally take center stage without someone rolling their eyes in the background. The ceremony concluded with shouts and laughter, as well as hugs that last a little longer because the individuals who give them truly mean it. Everyone carefully made their way to the reception area, which was brilliantly lit outside and included long wooden tables, hanging lights, and mellow music flowing through the dusk. It seemed like something out of a peaceful dream. Elegant, yet not pretentious. Intimate, but not small. Then the photographer appeared, pulling me away with a bewildered expression. "Hey," she said modestly. "There's a group of people kind of lingering near the trees at the edge of the venue. They haven't come in, but they're watching. Do you want me to do anything?" My jaw clenched. Before I turned to look, I knew. Sure enough, 3 individuals appeared across the little gravel road, half hidden behind the tree line. My mother, dressed in a pale blue gown I'd seen her wear to a gala years ago, standing stiffly with her arms crossed. My father had his hands in his pockets and was pretending to examine a brochure from a neighboring lodge while glancing at the wedding tent. Brooke, of course, wore a white pantsuit. White. Even from that distance I could see her face, pursed lips, flared nostrils, scanning the tables as if she was calculating who recognized her and who may notice she wasn't there. I grinned back at the photographer. "You don't need to do anything, just crop wide if they're in the background." She laughed, a little relieved, and returned to her camera. But as I watched the three of them stand there, like unwelcome souls haunting the edges of my delight, something in me changed. Not anger. Do not be afraid. Not even satisfaction. Just clarification. These individuals did not show up out of love. They did not show up because they missed me or had any regrets. They came to see what they believed they were entitled to, but weren't. They wanted to stand on the precipice of my happiness, and decide how much of it they would let me enjoy. And now that they had no say, they weren't sure what to do with themselves. The remarks began as the sun fell, casting everything in the golden tone that photographers seek like treasure. Laya's father delivered a touching toast that left everyone laughing and crying in equal measure. Then my best friend Oliver stood up, raised his glass, and said something that silenced the entire tent. "To David, the most loyal friend I've ever had, who spent years giving love to people who didn't see it for what it was, who finally found someone who saw him, and chose him. This guy has absorbed more punches from life than most individuals twice his age and has always shown up for everyone. But today, he stood up for himself. And it's about time." People applauded. Some stood. I didn't cry. But I could have, because I understood the version of myself who had longed to be seen had vanished. The person sitting at the table was not attempting to prove anything to anyone. I'd already won, not for vengeance but to recover the life they'd always told me I wasn't destined to have. My phone chimed just as dessert was served, little apple tarts and tiramisu squares. Brooke sent one message. It reads, "You are seriously going to regret this." No context, no explanation. Just venom concentrated into one sentence. I shifted the screen to Oliver. He read it and gave out a low whistle. Wow. She really thought this was about her. I grinned and struck the block without saying anything else. Later that night, as the sky filled with stars and people rocked to music beneath the string lights, I returned to the cabins to retrieve something from the lodge. As I circled the path near the property's edge, I heard piercing, quiet, angry voices. "He should have just let us in. I don't care what he thinks he's doing. That's our family." It was my mother. Still there. Still outraged. Then Brooke. I hope he chokes on his perfect little moment. Let's see how long it lasts once real life kicks in. I stood there for a second, just out of sight. I should have gone away and let it go. But something inside me told me to take a step forward, despite the years of silence, the swallowed pride, and the numerous times I accepted being an afterthought. So I did. I stepped through the trees and into their view, surprising all three of them. My mother gave a gasp. Brooke's eyes narrowed. My father just stared. "I know you're upset," I continued with a calm voice. "But you weren't uninvited. You were never invited. Because this day wasn't about correcting your version of me. It was about celebrating the person I've become without you. And the fact that you're here, hiding behind trees instead of being surrounded by love, tells me I made the right choice." Brooke clenched her jaw. "You think you're better than us now?" "No," I replied. "I think I'm finally free of you." Then I turned around and went away, back to the laughter, the light, and the people who had actually arrived. I didn't look back as I stepped away from the ghosts of my past. Each stride felt like an exhale that I had been holding in for years. The wedding was still alive behind me, with music floating through the trees, fairy lights twinkling like soft stars, and Laya's laughter reverberating with a warmth that no family occasion had ever provided me. I didn't need to see their faces to remember what I had left behind. I could feel it. 3 people standing in quiet, astonished by the one person they assumed would always come crawling back, eventually going away. When I returned to the reception, Laya drew my attention from across the dance floor. She was now barefoot, her shoes left under a table, her dress flowing as she twirled in a leisurely circle with her niece on her hip. She smiled at me as if nothing was missing. For the first time in my life, I agreed. We danced. We laughed. We cut the cake with no passive-aggressive remarks or forced photos. Our friends made uncomfortable and amusing toasts. Someone spilled red wine and blamed it on former exes. People stayed late, long after the music should have ceased. Nobody looked at their watches or pretended to care. They were just there. And so was I. When the night came to an end and the last lanterns were turned off, I sat with Laya on the cabin porch, wrapped in a blanket, in solitude. Just the two of us. She leaned her head against my shoulder. "I saw them," she replied gently. "I know. I wanted to say something, but I didn't want to ruin it." "You didn't," I muttered. "They couldn't ruin it. Even if they tried." She reached into her pocket and took out a small white envelope. "This came while you were getting ready. I didn't want to hand it to you before the ceremony." I took it gradually. My name was written in my mother's handwriting yet again. There was a $10,000 check inside, along with this note: "For the wedding expenses. We know things are probably tight. Don't let your pride ruin your marriage before it starts. Think about your future. Mom." There were no signatures. No warmth. Just assuming I was still on sale. I chuckled and slipped the check into the fire pit near us. The flames spread swiftly, twisting the paper into black wisps that floated into the air. Laya did not say anything. She simply drew the blanket tighter about us, and we stayed there until the fire died down, the last ember blazing like the final word. I never had to utter a thing. A week later, we were back at home. Married. A peaceful marriage. The venue had been cleaned, the deposit had been paid, the images were being edited, and the silence from my family was deafening. At first I believed they'd finally accepted it. My decision to break the cord they'd been yanking all my life. But then the repercussions began. Not from them, but from everyone around them. It started with a voicemail from my cousin Rachel. "Hey, I don't want to be weird, but your mom's been telling people you had a mental breakdown at the wedding. She said you kicked them out and that you banned the family because Laya doesn't like them. But I saw the photos. You guys looked happy. So, I just wanted to check. Are you okay?" I replayed the message twice. Then I checked Facebook. Sure enough, the day following the wedding, my mother wrote an ambiguous status. "When you raise someone with love and they repay you with exile, you have to let go and pray they find their way back before it's too late. Heartbroken vs. family, first." The responses were filled with sympathy. "Praying for you. Kids can be so selfish these days. You're such a strong woman." And of course, one from Brooke's closest friend. "Ugh, I still can't believe he didn't even let you stay. Disgusting." It would have been funny if it hadn't been so deliberate. They were spinning the story, attempting to reclaim control of a narrative they had lost. In their view, I was unstable, theatrical, and dominated by a manipulative wife, a cautionary story. So I did something I hadn't intended for. I replied. Not through a Facebook post or text thread. I wrote a letter, a real one. I printed it up, wrapped it in an envelope and shipped it to my parents, Brooke, and a few relatives who had expressed worry. There's no drama. Just facts. Dear family, you've made it apparent that your narrative of my life makes more sense to you than the truth ever has. So let me say it once, plainly. I did not experience a breakdown. I did not exclude you for malice or manipulation. I choose to start a new chapter in my life with individuals that love me for who I am, not what they expect me to be. Brooke, you once told me I wasn't wedding material and didn't deserve the spotlight. You chuckled while saying it, but the consequences were real. For years I internalized every casual word, every backhanded compliment, and every time I was treated as an afterthought. I kept quiet because I was taught that family forgives. But forgiveness necessitates remorse, and you have never acknowledged your words or actions. Mom, your check did not come from love. It arrived with strings. It was a leash presented as a gift. I do not need it. We never did. You were not excluded from my wedding. You were just never included in a moment that you had no role in creating. I've spent my life trying to be accepted by people who perceive me as the family's financial burden, the emotional punching bag, and the one who doesn't fit in. I'm done fitting into a mold you created out of bitterness and entitlement. I did not take you out of my life to punish you. I let you go because holding you is breaking me, and I will not carry that any longer. David. I sent the letter and moved on. There was no response, no apologies, not even a text. However, something unexpected began to develop gradually over the next few months. A cousin I hadn't seen in years messaged me, saying she always thought I was treated unfairly. An old family friend contacted me and said she was proud of how I stood up for myself. Even my Uncle Ray called again, this time in a calmer tone. They won't say it, he said to me. But they know. Deep down, they know. And it was enough. Leia and I moved into a new apartment 3 months after our wedding. It wasn't large, but it had a balcony, morning light, and enough room for a piano she acquired at a thrift store. She's playing while I'm cooking. Sometimes I just stop to watch her fingers glide across the keys, as if they're rewriting the soundtrack to my life. And every now and again, when the music floats through the open window and everything feels too calm, I recall that folding chair from Brooke's wedding. I remember the smirk, the side comments, and how they always acted as if I had to earn their love. I smile, because I finally understand that love is not acquired via pain. It was picked, and I choose to live without them. No more waiting for permission. No more shrinking to fit. No more setting a place at a table where I was never actually welcome. This life, imperfect, wonderful, and mine, is what I created when I stopped asking for permission. And I wouldn't trade it for a place at anyone's table. Not even theirs. Thanks for watching and sticking around till the end. If you enjoyed these stories, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss the next drama-filled episode. Family replaced me, on vacation with my fiancé's mistress. Called me the affair baby. I waited a year, then exposed them in front of 50 guests. I, 22 female, need some serious guidance on how to deal with any of this. I discovered about a week ago that my entire family had been assisting my fiancé, 23 male, in concealing his affair with my closest friend, 23 female. I made this account since I honestly don't have anyone else to tell this to. Honestly, my brain assumed that internet strangers would be the greatest option. Fortunately, none of my relatives or friends use Reddit. To provide additional emotional context, my fiancé and I have been together since 8th grade, on and off till 2020. I apologize if this is too long, but there is so lot to process, and I just want to refresh myself with everything I have while also figuring out how to approach my family, best friend, and fiancé with respect. To provide perspective, below are their names and ages. John, a half-brother, is 26 years old. Mary equals half-sister, 27. My mother, Angie, is 56 years old. Peach is my best friend, and soon-to-be ex-best friend. Alex is my fiancé, soon-to-be ex. So, a week ago, Alex was taking a shower and left his phone on the bed. My fiancé and I have an open phone policy, as we have both been cheated on in previous relationships. Go figure. Seeing my circumstance, I packed my suitcase for a family trip that would begin after my rehearsal supper tomorrow. I could hear his phone continuously going off. He yelled from the shower that I should mute his phone. I went to get his phone and discovered that it was Peach calling him. I was intrigued at first, but since she was a member of my bridal party, I didn't think it was too strange. I muted the phone and quickly messaged Peach using my own phone. Here's a paraphrase of our conversation. My response. Hey Peach, my fiancé is in the shower RN. What did you need? Peach, as usual. Oh, nothing LOL, just wanted to confirm with him the flowers for your bouquet and aisle. Your mom. That's weird. I didn't change my mind on any flowers or anything. The florist was contacted last month and everything was paid for already by Tony. Tony is the man who married my mom. Mrs. Peach. Are you sure? I remember him telling me you changed your mind. After that, there was the normal wedding discussion. In retrospect, I should have thought it strange that she would phone him 6 times to confirm a flower pick, when she could have just texted me or Alex. When Alex got out of the shower, I informed him Peach had tried phoning him about my flower selections. I asked him what made him think I'd changed my mind about the wedding flowers. He paused for a moment. I now realize he was procrastinating and making the, "oh, I'm thinking" face. He then stated that he believed I had mentioned it in passing during dinner. I told him I didn't remember that. He then shrugged, grabbed his phone, and returned to the bathroom. I hate to be one of those folks, but for once, my stomach sank. I couldn't shake this paranoid feeling. I tried to convince myself that it was just my previous infidelity trauma coming back, but I couldn't let it go. Alex and I had dinner, and I pushed through until it was time for bed. I feigned to sleep first. Alex and I normally cuddled to sleep. When I knew he was sound asleep, I proceeded to check his phone again. I checked his Instagram, Snapchat and iMessage but couldn't discover anything. I then visited his Facebook Messenger. He uses Messenger to communicate with his family overseas. I just saw his immediate family, and the majority of the messages were about buying plane tickets to attend the wedding. We were scheduled to get married in December with a winter wonderland theme. However, in prior partnerships I investigated his Messenger archives. That's when the horrible truth became clear. There was a group chat with Peach, Alex, John, Angie, and Mary. The group chat was created a year ago, after Alex and Peach admitted to having an affair with my family. My mother initially shamed them, but later questioned Alex whether he truly loved Peach, since, you can't help who you love. Yeah, a terrific mother. That was incredibly helpful. He claimed he was very certain and that he also loved me. TF. Then Mary and John suggested that he, as Alex, approach me about an open relationship. They are both in open relationships and married, and it appears to be working for them wherever they dwell. At this point, he and I were already engaged. Alex mentioned that it seemed too deep to bring up. Angie, my mother, even though I despise the term at this point, stated that they would cover for Alex and Peach until he felt confident enough to discuss an open relationship with me. As I read, all I could think was, how could my family betray me like that? Peach, how could you betray me like that? We have been buddies since kindergarten. We even grew up alongside Alex. How could she possibly fuck my fiancé while yet claiming to love him? All of this in this horrible group chat, and Alex has the guts to declare he loves me as well, for him to experience firsthand what it is like to be betrayed. I really wanted to vomit. However, I was only taking screenshot after screenshot. As I read further, I discovered that Peach had taken my place on our previous family trip. I suffered an extremely severe stomach bug a while back, so I didn't go. I can't imagine what they did on the trip, and the fact that my mother was all right with it all, I believe, is what stings the most. The fact that she's known my fiancé was cheating on me for a year is what's taking the longest to deal with. I believe there is more in the group conversation, but these were the main themes. I've known for a full week. It's been eating at me inside and I want to scream and curse them all out. I want to ruin their life like they did mine. It all hurts so deeply, and I just need some guidance on how to address them. How should I even begin? What can I possibly say? The wrath I feel is so strong that I fear that if I let it all out, I would appear insane. Please Reddit. Anything will help. I plan to face them tomorrow at our rehearsal dinner. Additional details from OOP. I have some new material to offer to some frequently asked questions. Why are you hosting the rehearsal dinner so early? Alex and I agreed on 3 rehearsal dinners. One for my family friends, one for his family friends in town, and one for our families united. Our families and social groups are large, and most people had conflicting schedules on the one day we attempted to plan. So, to suit everyone, we simply divided them into groups and scheduled dates that worked best for them. Is Alex living with me? Yes. I purchased the apartment while he was living with his housemates in his dorm. I let him move in because he and his roommates couldn't get along after some friend drama. We've lived together for 2 years. His name isn't on the lease. I did some research and will absolutely use it to my advantage. We have a cat, but after all of this, she's staying with me, and I'll fight him tooth and nail for her. Half-siblings both had open marriages. Yes. They jumped on the humans aren't meant to be monogamous bandwagon. They both have poly relationships, which they discussed with their partners. So, on their end, nothing is wrong. My relationship with my mother? At best, it is a combination of tumult and serenity. When I reached the age of 18, she apologized for the emotional and mental torture she had subjected me to during my childhood. I assumed she was genuinely sorry, and we were striving to repair our relationship. With all of this, I'm not convinced we had one to develop in the first place. I am her affair baby, as I have been dubbed. My mother is deeply devout, and she believed that if she confessed, she would be rescued and redeemed. The reverse occurred. She was booted out of her church group. Anyone who lives in a small town is aware that rumors spread quickly. Tony, my mother's husband, forgave her and chose to relocate to improve their image, I suppose. According to one Redditor, this episode could be the reason she hates me. But I can't understand how this could be my fault, or why she would hang on to that grudge for so long. Does anyone know that I saw the messages? Once I took the screenshots, I removed them from his phone and saved them on mine. I have a passcode for my gallery, NSFW content. I changed my code, and Alex has not checked my phone, so I feel protected in that regard. I change the passcode, and if he asks, I'll simply give him some BS. Lie about how my niece attempted to peek at images, and I had to change it. When was the wedding? December 17th. Who paid for the wedding? The wedding was organized by myself, Alex, my stepfather, and my cousin. My mother handled the more diplomatic aspects, such as invitations and our gift registry. Hopefully, this provides enough further information for some people. I appreciate it all. I am going to bed soon to prepare for tomorrow. I know tomorrow will be a long and emotional day, but I am confident that with all of your support, I will do well. I'm aiming to at least update once. Hello everyone. It's been approximately 3 hours since the rehearsal supper. Everything is right now. But I'm glad the difficult part is finished. I simply wanted to say something fast before sharing the update. To those threatening to dox me to prove my story is false, please go fuck yourselves. I'm going through a really difficult moment in my life, and the last thing I need is some folks on a personal quest to prove my struggle is a hoax. I already deal with an abusive mother. I already have a lot to worry about. My emotions are still heightened and intense. I apologize if I rambled in certain places. With that out of the way, here's the update. I ended up accepting bits and pieces of advice from everyone. Last night I alternated between going ghost and erupting on everyone. I opted to choose a combination of both routes. I submitted the screenshots to Alex's parents and explained the situation to them. I honestly expected them to dismiss it or not believe me. However, they called quickly. They questioned if I had any hard evidence of them cheating aside from their admissions. I admitted to them that I didn't. They asked for more screenshots, so I basically sent them a large portion of them. His mother made me feel bad about mailing them. She sobbed and apologized for her son. She quickly grew inconsolable. His father took the phone and asked if there was anything his son could do to make amends to me. I was angry when he asked that so early in the morning, but I eventually understood his point of view. I asked him if I could be candid, and he agreed. I told him that unless his son shriveled up and vanished, there was nothing he could say. His father said that he understood. I asked if they could keep this between themselves until I brought it up with Alex. They said they could, so we closed the call. For a time, I thought vomiting from stress was uncommon, but it finally happened. I suppose Alex heard what I said. Not the phone call, but my vomit. I stepped outside to have it since he awoke and attempted to rub my back. I raised my hand and cleaned myself up. This was about 7 a.m. in the morning. Alex expressed concern in his voice and asked if I was all right. For once I saw only crimson. I managed to maintain my composure. I'm not sure why, but I suppose that will be my superpower to keep. I ignored him and went back to sleep. I got back up at 8 a.m. and started preparing for the rehearsal dinner. Alex informed me he needed to get some things done before going to the restaurant. I told him that was all right, and I'd see him later. Before he departed, he told me how much he loved me and how eager he was for this day. I answered, "Me too," trying not to show any fury. Once he went, I gathered all of the screenshots. Some people may not be aware that you may schedule text messages to be sent at specific times. I decided to email it to everyone. Peach's family, our mutual friends, his family and mine. I set it to go out at 1:25 p.m. This would mark the halfway point of the dinner, and guests would be dropping off gifts for us ahead of schedule, among other things. I gathered the black hole of stress that was building inside me, and went to the restaurant when it was time. My mother and her spouse were already present. My mother hugged me, and I could only stand there. To have her hands on me felt like she was directly violating my spirit. I gave her a brief tap embrace so she wouldn't become suspicious, and we went inside. Guests began to arrive and everyone was remarkably on time, except for my grandparents who walked slowly, so I couldn't blame them. Once everyone had gathered, Alex went on about how glad he was that everyone could attend and how excited he was for his family. The next dinner was intended to be on November 20th. He remarked how I was the love of his life and how glad he was that our families would meet and we could become one. I wanted to question him how he could say such a thing, but all I got was false grins and nods. Peach was basically appearing like a dumb dog, smiling and applauding for us. It's simply mind-boggling to watch how far people would go to get what they want. I could barely eat because the worry was overwhelming me. People's phones started vibrating about the time I specified for the texts. Alex and Peach's phones blew up. I'd like to mention that, for once, a genuine smile appeared on my face. It was like witnessing an entire kingdom disintegrate and fall. Peach and Alex's shocked expressions when they saw me were priceless. It is the one memory I will cherish from this sad day. My aunt went crazy. She began calling my mother a horrible, heartless bitch again and over. My mother quickly checked her phone and discovered I had forwarded the screenshots. She screamed and became enraged, accusing me of once again attempting to ruin her life. As some of you observed, she still appears to be distraught about being caught having an affair and being shunned. The most hurtful reaction came from my grandparents, who began yelling at my mother. My grandma and a few of our other guests were trying to hold my aunt back as she began yelling every expletive she could. My grandfather was screaming at my mother that he hadn't raised a whore. Everyone is in a state of hysterical yelling and wailing. My other bridesmaids were cursing at Peach and called her a slut. I hate to confess it, but I found satisfaction in it. My grandfather went on to shout at Alex, saying things I can't express here since he was so graphic. I just began laughing and sobbing. I experienced so many feelings that I honestly believe my body didn't know what to do, so it did everything. The tears continued pouring. My cousin escorted me outside as quickly as she could, as Alex pursued us. He kept yelling my name and begged to speak. He wanted to chat, as most of you recommended, to clarify his point of view. I ignored him, as my cousin pushed him away from her car so she could get inside and drive away. She escorted me to my aunt's house and instructed me not to open the door for anyone. I felt like a kid being left at home alone, LOL. I did not. I just sat on the floor. That's when I simply started crying. All of the feelings I had been holding in for a week had finally surfaced. After approximately another hour, my aunt and cousin returned home. They hugged me for around 5 minutes. When we finally parted ways, I noticed my aunt had several scratches on her. I'm assuming they couldn't keep my aunt away from my mother for much longer. My aunt updated me on everything. Apparently, as my cousin drove away with me, Alex returned and began shouting at Peach for spoiling everything. They got into a yelling match, and several of our friends attempted to separate them. My grandparents, Aunt and Tony, my mother's husband, were questioning her for answers. Tony was the most incensed. Apparently, during the family trip I was unable to attend, my mother informed Tony that I had handed Peach my ticket so she could take a well-deserved rest. At this time, Tony is yelling and reading some of her messages aloud. She begged him to stop and said she could explain. My aunt went on to say that she should start explaining since all she sees is a lousy mother and a terrible person. This apparently enraged my mother, who began yelling about how much she despised me, how I had wrecked and complicated her life. She felt that she could never be happy since I was a daily reminder of her biggest mistake ever, and she regretted not aborting me when she had the opportunity. That irritated my aunt, and she pounced on her. For reference, my aunt is infertile. She referred to me as the daughter she never had. So in her mind, she went full mama bear on my birth giver, as I'm now calling her. My aunt has been a better mother to me than my mother has been in the last 22 years. To cut a long story short, I'm really becoming emotional again, and the weariness and empty stomach aren't helping. Here's everything else that happened. Tony is divorcing my mother. He has had suspicions for several months that she is cheating again. Peach revealed Alex's texts to her, stating that he was sleeping with her because he believed I was becoming distant. I was working overtime at work a while back to save for his birthday, and he mentioned that he was lonely and didn't know how to bring it up with me. Peach's father bombarded her with calls and cut her off financially. Apparently this is my fault, and I am a wicked witch for ruining her, according to her texts. My mother has gone on a rant with our family, calling me an awful person for destroying her world again. I should have thought about that before condoning anything. Half-siblings felt it was not their place to say anything to me, and that I should have expected Alex to go elsewhere since humans aren't monogamous, and people love who they love. Same old, same old. A lot more has happened, but in order to keep my brain from imploding from stress and rage, I'm finally letting it out. I've been getting texts and calls from everyone, but I've left my phone in the other room. I am updating this from my aunt's computer. My aunt offered to let me stay with her until I got out of this tangled mess. I accepted it because I had no intention of returning to that place. I've already emailed my landlord, and will handle everything next week. My manager contacted me back, saying I could use some PTO for as long as I needed. I will absolutely accept it, as I am seriously considering moving somewhere quiet and serene. I'm thinking Iowa or North Carolina, where I've heard the cost of living is reasonable. I want to thank you all again. I sincerely appreciate all of the help and support I've received. After today, I'll be offline for a few days. I feel like I need to disengage from everything and just be comfortable with myself. My aunt and cousin are at my house collecting some of my belongings, including my cat. Alex is there, imploring them not to seize my belongings and instead to let me talk to him. I'm not sure what he believes a chat will do. My emotional and mental scar will remain with me for some time. I also know I have a long journey ahead of me in therapy. Many people have pointed out that my mother abused me terribly. Now that I know how much she despises me, it will be easier to maintain no contact. Now, an update. Maybe Reddit won't screw me up. If the issues in my original post cannot be resolved, I shall summarize them. To provide background for new people. Peach. Ex-best pal. Alex equals ex-fiancé. The egg donor is my mother. Tony is the egg donor's soon-to-be ex-husband. I messaged Alex's parents with the screenshots. His parents were really upset. I ordered text messages to be delivered to everyone during the rehearsal dinner. I also forwarded the screenshots to Peach's father. He is her only parent. Her mother is no longer with us. Bless her. I also made sure it went to Peach's family. I added them to the scheduled bulk SMS after deciding they needed to know. I also forwarded them to my family, Alex's family, and my own. Everything became chaotic after the allocated time had passed. My now ex-friends were berating Peach for the reasons why things had escalated. Peach's father had cut her off financially. My grandparents, aunt and Tony began interrogating my mother for explanations. I suppose under duress she confessed to hating me. She blames me for her difficult and wrecked life. I discovered that I was the result of a long-term affair. My aunt physically assaulted my mother after she insulted me. She's proud of it, she kept telling me. When the pandemonium broke out, my cousin rushed to get me out. Alex attempted to pursue us, but my cousin got between him and escorted me to my aunt's house. This is where I'm still at. My phone has been exploding since then. When my aunt returned home, she went over everything with me again. They collected my belongings from the apartment. The most important thing to me was my cat. And this is where my previous update left off. However, things have rapidly escalated. I turned back on my phone after waking up and taking a long, hot shower. I couldn't even unlock it or clear alerts before receiving a call from one of my bridesmaids. I responded, and she immediately began yelling at me about how I could ignore Peach and Alex in their time of need. At first I was perplexed, given that I no longer care about them. I asked her not to yell at me, but she did anyway. She yelled, "Peach self-harmed." When she sent me the photographs, they were very top surface level, so the scar appeared as a small blot. Whether or not it was deep enough, it rocked me. I wanted to sneer on the phone because I knew she was doing it to raise support for her cause since I hadn't responded to her texts yet. She also informed me Alex attempted to overdose. His pals discovered him in my apartment, sleepy. They rushed him to the hospital where he was cleared because they didn't need to pump. They are keeping him under watch for the next 72 hours, which is a good thing. Just because I despise his guts doesn't mean he deserves to die. Following this, my friend circle was severely divided. I have no intention of speaking with either of them because I did not respond to them prior to their actions. I don't care what they do to get attention, as long as they leave me alone. During the initial encounter with my egg donor, Tony discovered that my egg donor had lied to him, claiming that Peach may take my ticket to accompany him on the trip. They returned home and began bickering more because Tony mentioned his thoughts about my mother cheating. She began yelling at him and admitting everything. She told him that my half-siblings are not his, among other nasty things. He had to contact the police to take her off his property. Tony followed up with me this morning. Yes, he is divorcing her. His lawyers are drafting the documents within the next week or so, and they informed me that my mother admitted that I was the result of a long-term affair she had with his best buddy. My egg donor is a very vile woman, as I'm about to discover. However, after learning that Tony is receiving documents, she attempted to backpedal. She's been calling my aunt, imploring her to persuade Tony not to do this, or else she'll be homeless. She has tried calling Tony and his family, but they have all ignored her. Smile. However, this wasn't enough for my egg donor. She knew my aunt's schedule and attempted to abuse me. My cousin was still with me, so she couldn't come inside. Hearing her scream at me, however, exacerbated some of my very basic anxieties, and I began to panic. My cousin led me upstairs. Then we heard a huge crash. My mother broke through the window, ran upstairs, and assaulted me. For the first time in my life, I responded to my egg donor. I finally vented all of my rage onto her. My cousin was fighting to keep us apart, so she had to rush to get our neighbor. I only have a few scratches and bite marks, but otherwise, I am fine. I am also filing charges against my egg donor. Hopefully I can obtain a restraining order. To be honest, my mother fled before the police arrived, but I provided them with Tony's address in case she attempted to return. I see that those terrible people won't stop until they obtain a response from me. On the odd side, I received a call from my half-sister. She started to apologize, but I cut her off since I didn't want to hear it anymore. She then scoffed and had the audacity to ask me to keep my nieces while she, her husband, and her boyfriend went on a trip. I adore my nieces and nephews, but I told her to go fuck herself. If she wanted me to watch her nieces, she'd have to ask my aunt. She began yelling about how I was being unjust to her and punishing her children. I said I was punishing her. She said, never mind, and that I couldn't see my nieces. This was something I expected, but it still crushed my heart. I'm very sure she's telling them I despise them. I'm retaining the screenshots, and my aunt and cousin have promised to back me up if they contact me again in the future. This is everything. So much. But I honestly expect more to happen. I know one thing about my egg donor. She hates losing. I know she perceives this as a loss, and she will not stop until she wins. My half-brother has blocked me on everything, and I believe he is siding with my half-sister. I'm simply so emotional, but I wanted to give you an update. I'll update again if anything else happens, but if not, this will most likely be my final update. I just want this show to finish. In excellent news, I begin treatment next week. My aunt and cousin are already packing Alex's belongings and dropping them off with a friend of his. His name is Kyle. He's on my side and has been a great assistance to me throughout this. He dropped off my favorite fruit with my aunt this morning. He also told me that I could chat to him at any moment. I inquired if he would continue to communicate with Alex, and he answered no. He's only holding on to his belongings till his parents can pick them up. I greatly appreciate him. But that's all for now. I will post an update in the comments once I receive the restraining order. Thanks for watching and being part of the drama. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss a wild news story. On our wedding night, I discovered a shocking truth about my husband. He needed his mother's presence during our first night together. My name is Jenny, and I'm 26 years old. Our wedding day was, quite simply, everything I had ever dreamed it would be. As Alex and I stood hand in hand under the archway of blooming roses, our vows echoed softly under the vast blue sky. Our friends and family, gathered in a beautifully decorated garden, watched with teary eyes and broad smiles as we promised to love and cherish each other. The air was filled with the scent of summer flowers, the sounds of laughter, and the gentle strains of violin that seemed to weave magic into the atmosphere. It was a day marked by joy, a celebration of love in its purest form, encapsulating the promise of a new beginning. As Alex and I planned our wedding, the usual joys and stresses of preparing for such a grand day were accompanied by the subtle shadows of Alex's past. Hints of his old hidden scars began to emerge amidst conversations about table settings and guest lists. There were fleeting moments when his eyes would cloud over, or he'd fall silent, seemingly gripped by a memory only he could see. I noticed these instances, the small cracks in his otherwise sturdy facade. My heart ached to know what weighed on him, but I respected his privacy fiercely. Alex was a man who valued his inner sanctum, and I loved him all the more for his complexities. So, I did not press, choosing instead to focus on our love and the excitement of starting our new life together. In the whirl of wedding preparations, my relationship with Mrs. Green, Alex's mother, took on a life of its own. From the outset, she was more than just a future mother-in-law. She was a presence of warmth and understanding, a comforting anchor in the sometimes overwhelming sea of wedding decisions. Her intuition about people was uncanny, and her ability to navigate Alex's moods proved invaluable, especially as the wedding drew closer and his episodes of withdrawal became more frequent. One chilly afternoon, as we pored over old family photo albums searching for inspiration for our wedding slideshow, Mrs. Green shared stories of Alex as a boy, his mischievous smile, his boundless energy, and also, his quiet moments. She spoke with a nostalgic smile, but her eyes betrayed a hint of sadness, a mother's concern that had weathered many unseen storms. It was during these intimate gatherings that I began to understand the depth of their bond, and how deeply the threads of past traumas were woven into the fabric of Alex's current being. Her role in our lives became even more pronounced as she helped me navigate through the complexities of bonding with a man whose heart had been scarred at such a young age. She had an exquisite tact in guiding me on how to be there for Alex, never overstepping, yet always providing just enough insight to help me connect with him on a deeper level. This delicate balance of distance and closeness in her advice helped me respect Alex's pace without feeling shut out. When it came time to choose gifts for Alex, be it his birthday or Christmas, Mrs. Green proved an indispensable ally. She had an exceptional knack for knowing exactly what would touch Alex's heart. Each gift we selected was not just a material item but a symbol, a message in a bottle sent into the depths of his heart, affirming love, understanding, and acceptance. Shopping trips with Mrs. Green for these gifts became our little tradition, times filled with laughter and shared secrets, weaving me deeper into the family tapestry. The most memorable moment came a few weeks before the wedding. After a long day spent finalizing seating arrangements and menu choices, Mrs. Green invited me for tea at her house. The house was quiet, a soft classical melody playing in the background, lending an air of serenity to the room. We sat in her sun-drenched living room, surrounded by plants that thrived under her careful attention, mirroring the nurturing nature of her personality. With a gentle, almost reverential tone, Mrs. Green said she had something special for me. From an old ornately carved wooden box, she pulled out a small velvet case. Inside was a ring, a beautiful antique piece that had belonged to Alex's great-grandmother. The ring was delicate, its band worn thin by time, its stone still catching the light with a fiery sparkle. As she placed it in my hand, her fingers lingered over mine, her touch conveying layers of meaning. "This ring," she began, her voice soft but clear, "is more than just a family heirloom. It is a symbol of our acceptance and trust in you, Jenny. It's a welcome into our family. A family that, like this ring, has weathered many storms and survived. It is a testament not just to the past, but to the future we hope to build with you in it." The weight of the ring in my palm felt monumental, as if the small circle of metal encapsulated more than just familial history. It was a binding promise, a token of faith. The ring, with its intricate engravings and warm golden hue, symbolized the merging of past and future, of memories and hopes. As I slipped it onto my finger, it felt like a shield, imbued with the strength and love of the women who had worn it before me. Tears welled up in my eyes as I looked up at Mrs. Green, overwhelmed by the depth of her gesture. Her eyes met mine, mirroring my emotions. At that moment, I understood the sacredness of what she had given me. It was an affirmation of my place beside Alex, an endorsement of my role not just as his wife, but as a daughter to her. "Thank you," I managed to say, my voice thick with emotion. "I promise to honor the love and trust you've placed in me." She nodded, her smile tender. "I know you will, my dear. You already have." On the morning of our wedding, the early sun painted the sky with strokes of pink and orange, promising a day as radiant as the love Alex and I shared. The gentle breeze whispered through the leaves, carrying with it the soft, melodious chirps of morning birds. As I awoke, a flutter of excitement danced in my stomach, and a smile spread across my face, the kind that comes from deep within, knowing that today, I would marry the man I loved. The venue was nestled on the edge of a lush, sprawling garden that bloomed with life, each petal and leaf vibrant under the warm glow of the sun. It was here, among the weaving paths and fragrant blooms, that we had chosen to bind our lives together. The garden was more than just a venue, it was a reflection of our relationship, natural, blooming, and beautifully wild. As the morning progressed, the air filled with the sounds of preparation. The clinking of dishes, the soft rustling of floral arrangements being perfected, and the gentle directives of the wedding planner created a symphony of anticipation. Each vendor moved with a purpose, their expertise turning our vision into reality. The tables were set with fine linen, each piece of cutlery placed with precision. Centerpieces of wildflowers and greenery adorned the tables, their colors popping against the crisp white tablecloths. The ceremony area was set in a quiet corner of the garden, under a large oak tree whose branches stretched out as if to embrace the gathering. Beneath its sturdy boughs, a simple wooden arch stood decorated with white and soft pink roses, intertwined with ivy and sprigs of lavender. The chairs for our guests were arranged in a gentle arc, each one adorned with a small bouquet of flowers tied with a ribbon, fluttering lightly in the breeze. Guests began to arrive, their faces bright with joy and attire colorful, adding to the festive atmosphere. The hum of their greetings and laughter blended into the background music, a carefully chosen playlist of soft romantic tunes that Alex and I had spent nights curating. Each song held a memory, a piece of our journey, and now they played for all to hear, setting the stage for the promises we were about to make. As the time drew near, my heart began to beat a little faster, the reality of the moment settling in. Accompanied by my father, I took a deep breath and stepped into the hidden pathway that would lead me to the archway. The sight that greeted me took my breath away. There, waiting for me, was Alex. He stood tall and sure, his suit tailored perfectly to him, complementing his form. His hair was styled neatly, and his face held an expression of awe and tenderness as he watched me approach. The walk down the aisle felt like a lifetime and a moment all at once. With each step, I moved closer not just to Alex, but to the new life we would build together. The eyes of our loved ones followed me, but all I could see was him. As I reached his side, his hand reached out for mine, a silent promise of support and love that sent warmth spreading through me. The ceremony was a heartfelt exchange of vows that we had written ourselves. Alex's voice was steady but filled with emotion as he spoke his vows. His words painted a picture of our past and a promise of our future, each sentence carefully chosen to convey his love and commitment. My vows echoed his in sentiment, spoken through tears of happiness that streamed freely down my cheeks. There was laughter too, as we interjected little anecdotes of our life together, making the ceremony deeply personal and joyously authentic. As we exchanged rings, the symbol of our endless love and the seal of our vows, the oak tree above us seemed to stand a little taller, its leaves rustling as if in applause. The kiss that followed was both a seal of our promises and a celebration, met with cheers and clapping from our guests. The reception that followed was a blur of dancing, eating, and heartfelt speeches. The first dance was to a song that had seen us through our hardest times, its lyrics now a testament to the strength of our bond. As Alex spun me around the dance floor, the world fell away, leaving only the sound of the music and the feeling of being completely, utterly loved. Our families and friends made speeches that brought both roars of laughter and tender tears. Each word spoken was a thread added to the tapestry of our day, weaving a memory that would hold strong in the years to come. The food was exquisite, each bite a burst of flavor, a celebration of our day. The cake, a simple yet elegant design of white frosting and flowers, was cut amidst cheers, its sweetness a perfect metaphor for the life awaiting us. As the day transitioned into evening, the lights dimmed to a golden hue, casting shadows that danced along with the guests. Alex and I moved among our loved ones, our hearts brimming with happiness. Every moment felt suspended in time, from the heartfelt speeches that brought tears to our eyes to our first dance, where we swayed to a melody that spoke only to our souls. The world around us blurred into a background of sparkling lights and soft music, with the only focus being the profound connection between us. Yet, as the night wore on and the last of the guests bid their farewells, a subtle shift occurred. The exhaustion from the day's emotions and festivities began to settle in, and with it came a thickness in the air, as if it were laden with unspoken truths. I sensed it most acutely when we finally retreated to our room, the sanctuary where we had planned to end our perfect day. But instead of the comforting silence I had anticipated, there was a palpable tension, a stirring of something deep and unnerving that I couldn't quite identify. Alex, who had been the bastion of strength throughout our relationship, seemed suddenly distant, his usual calm demeanor replaced by a nervous energy that thrummed quietly beneath his skin. I had always known there were aspects of his past that shadowed his bright smile, hints of dark chapters he had never fully disclosed. Our relationship had been built on a foundation of deep mutual respect and understanding, and I had learned to navigate the delicate balance between his openness and the secrets he guarded so closely. I respected his privacy, never pushing for more than he was willing to share. Understanding that some wounds were deeply ingrained, etched into one's soul by experiences too painful to relive. The unexpected knock at our door came just as I was about to speak, to breach the subject that hung heavily between us. It was Mrs. Green, Alex's mother, her presence on the threshold of our bridal suite as surprising as it was alarming. The sight of my husband whispering urgently with his mother in the dimly lit corridor was something I had not anticipated on our wedding night. The warmth and guidance Mrs. Green had always extended to me felt suddenly invasive, her timing inexplicable. "Mom, I can't come. Can you come in?" Alex's voice, barely a whisper, carried a weight I had never heard before. His words, though softly spoken, seemed to fill the room, making the walls close in around us. My heart raced with a mixture of confusion and concern, questions forming faster than I could voice them. As they stepped into our room, the space that had once felt like a haven now seemed too small, the air too thick, as if filled with the dense fog of impending revelations. Mrs. Green's presence, although always a source of comfort in the past, now marked a moment of intrusion, an unexpected interruption in what should have been a private celebration of our union. Yet the look in her eyes, one of deep empathy mixed with a mother's protective instinct, prompted me to pause, to reassess the situation that was unfolding before me. It was clear that this was not just a breach of newlywed privacy. It was a necessary intervention, a moment that Alex needed more than I had realized. Mrs. Green's eyes flicked between Alex and me, her face etched with a mixture of apology and urgency. It was clear that this was not a mere intrusion, but a necessity born of something deeper, something distressing. Alex, usually so composed, looked visibly shaken, his eyes pleading for understanding. "What's happening?" I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. The air felt thick with unspoken truths, the kind that could alter the course of a relationship forever. There was a palpable pause, heavy with hesitation. Mrs. Green glanced at Alex, who seemed momentarily lost for words, his gaze fixed on the floor. Then, gathering her resolve, she looked directly at me, her voice steady but soft. "Jenny, there's something about Alex's past that you need to know, something he might have struggled to tell you himself." Her words were gentle, but they cut through the silence with the sharpness of glass. After a brief moment of silence, during which Mrs. Green seemed to calculate her answer, she turned to her son with wide eyes. "Wait. You told her about—" Alex shook his head. "Go ahead. What were you thinking? The poor thing must think we're a couple of weirdos." Alex looked deep into my eyes before he sighed and began to reveal his biggest secret. "When I was just 5 years old, the unthinkable happened. A burglar broke the peace of our home by breaking in through my bedroom window. That night, under the cover of darkness, my world changed forever. The intruder's silhouette, the menacing presence in my sanctuary left me frozen in terror. I could not cry out or escape, and the result of the breach was a deep, all-pervading fear that clung to me long after the broken glass had been swept away and the window secured. In the following nights, my bedroom felt like a battlefield, every shadow a reminder of my vulnerability. Sleep, once a refuge, became an insurmountable challenge. But in the midst of my fear, my mother became my guardian angel. Night after night she sat by my bedside, her presence a beacon of safety in the dark. With the gentle timbre of her voice, she spun stories of courage and adventure, of heroes who faced their fears and emerged victorious. These bedtime stories, more than just stories, became our ritual, a shared journey back to a sense of normalcy and safety. My mother's steadfast patience and love taught me that there is a source of strength despite crippling fear. Within us a resilience that can be nurtured and nurtured. Since that terrifying night, my mother has been my steadfast companion in my search for peace as I fall asleep, her presence reminding me that even in our darkest moments we are not alone. The revelation of Alex's childhood trauma had left the room steeped in a solemn air, charged with the rawness of newly shared pain. As Alex's secret unfolded, my initial reaction was one of shock, the kind that sends a chill through your very core, not just because of the horror of what he endured, but because of the profound depth of his hidden scars. My hands trembled slightly as the reality settled over me. This man I loved, so strong and composed, had carried this heavy shadow alone for so long. The weight of his past, a burden he had borne in solitude, now lay between us, but not as a barrier. Instead, it bridged our hearts with a newfound understanding. I felt a deep ache for him, the child who had faced such terror, and the man who had grown up shadowed by fear. But within that ache was a blooming determination, a resolve to be the support he needed, the partner he deserved. Alex looked into my eyes, vulnerability written across his face, and asked a simple question that encompassed so much. "So, how can I help you?" His words, meant to be comforting, only underscored the role reversal we were experiencing. Here he was, still trying to be the protector, the provider, even in his moment of disclosure. "It's not about how you can help me, but how I can help you," I replied gently, taking his hand in mine. The contact was a small physical reassurance that I was there, fully present and ready to face this battle alongside him. Mrs. Green, who had been a silent pillar of strength up until now, spoke up, her voice calm and soothing, providing the guidance I needed. "Whenever Alex feels anxious or overwhelmed, especially at night, specific cuddling has always helped to calm him down," she explained. "Hold him close, with his head resting on your heart. It's a method that has soothed him since childhood." I nodded, absorbing her advice with the seriousness it deserved. Although he has largely outgrown the need for this, his anxiety can still overwhelm him in stressful times, she continued. "It is important to be patient and understanding, and offer him physical reassurance. This approach has often been the key to helping him find peace and sleep." Armed with this new knowledge, I turned to Alex, inviting him into an embrace that I hoped would offer not just comfort, but also a sanctuary from his anxieties. He hesitated for a brief moment, then allowed himself to be held. As he laid his head upon my chest, I could feel his body tensed like a bowstring, the muscles tight with the effort of maintaining his composure. Gradually, as we remained locked in that embrace, I felt the tension begin to ebb from his body, his breathing slowing to match the steady beat of my heart. The room, filled with the echoes of our wedding celebrations just hours before, now resonated with a quieter, deeper connection. Every heartbeat seemed to whisper reassurance, a rhythmic reminder that he was safe, that he was not alone. In that moment, as I held Alex, the significance of what we were doing dawned on me. This was not just about providing comfort in a time of need, it was a profound act of sharing and healing. We were rewriting the narratives of his past fears with a new story. One of trust, support, and unconditional love. As Alex's breaths deepened and evened out, signaling his drift into sleep, the weight of his worries seemed to dissipate, lifting not only from his shoulders but from the air around us. I felt a protective surge, a fierce desire to shield him from any further pain, and a commitment to be the partner he could lean on whenever the shadows of his past loomed too large. Mrs. Green, having observed the transformation from the sidelines, gave a silent nod of approval and gratitude before quietly leaving the room. Her departure was discreet, a respectful acknowledgement of the new intimacy Alex and I were forging. Her expression as she left was one of peace, a mother's relief palpable in her eyes, knowing her son was in caring hands. The impact of that night lingered long after Alex had fallen asleep and the first light of dawn crept into our room. Lying awake, I reflected on the journey ahead. It would require patience, empathy, and an openness to understand and soothe the scars of a trauma I had never experienced. But more than anything, I felt ready to be the partner Alex needed, to walk alongside him as we navigated the complexities of his healing together. The vulnerability he showed and my response to it did not weaken our bond. Instead, it fortified it. We were no longer just husband and wife. We were partners in a journey of healing and understanding. Each day as we navigated his anxieties and fears together, our connection deepened, transforming from romantic love into something far more profound, a sanctuary, a safe haven where we could be our truest selves without fear of judgment. This tender, pivotal night marked not just the beginning of our marriage but the deepening of our bond, a testament to the power of shared vulnerabilities and mutual support. It underscored a fundamental truth about love, that it is at its most potent not in the easy, joyful moments, but in the quiet, challenging ones where we choose to stand together, facing the hidden battles with resilience and hope. As dawn broke over the horizon, painting the sky with hues of new beginnings, I knew that together, we were stronger, and together, we would heal. This experience taught us that love is not just about sharing joy and happiness, but also about bearing witness to each other's deepest fears, and standing steadfast in the face of personal demons. It's about building a life where each person feels supported and understood, a foundation so strong that even the darkest past could not destabilize it. Our story, though rooted in pain and vulnerability, is ultimately one of triumph, of love's power to heal and transform. It serves as a testament to the fact that the most profound intimacy comes from baring one's soul and being met with compassion and unwavering support. As Alex and I continue to grow together, we cherish the lessons learned from that night, a night that began with uncertainty but ended with the reassuring understanding that together, we are invincible. This narrative of our first night as a married couple encapsulates the essence of our ongoing journey, a narrative of confronting shadows, fostering understanding, and celebrating the resilient, healing power of love. My dad turned to drink and criticized Mom after her brother cheated us, causing us to lose land. I am Mary, a sophomore in college, and my life today feels like a shadow of what it once was. Just a few years ago, my family embodied the warmth and joy that I believed would always define us. My father, a robust man with an infectious laugh, was the kind of dad who would spend hours in the garden, teaching me and my younger brother, Alex, the names of all the flowers and how to take care of them. My mother, a gentle soul with eyes that seemed to hold endless kindness, made our small cozy house a home with her loving touch and the heavenly smell of her cooking. Back then the future seemed bright. Our little family was tight-knit, bound by love and shared dreams, especially after my parents managed to buy a hectare of land from my uncle, my mother's brother. That land was more than just soil and greenery, it represented a legacy, a future where our family could build and grow, both literally and metaphorically. We envisioned a small family farm, maybe a few rental cottages that could nestle in the shade of the large oak trees dotting the landscape. It was a symbol of stability and hope, a tangible piece of prosperity that promised to anchor our family for generations. My Uncle James, my mother's younger brother, had always been a charismatic and persuasive figure. Growing up, I saw him as a fun-loving uncle who seemed to breeze through life, always with a ready joke or a small gift for me and Alex. He was a frequent visitor in our home, his arrival often heralding impromptu barbecues and late-night storytelling sessions. My mother adored him. She often spoke of their childhood adventures with a fondness and nostalgia that painted my uncle as not just a sibling but a hero in her eyes. This deep familial bond made him more than just an uncle to us. He was an integral part of our family fabric. My parents, especially my mother, trusted him implicitly. This trust was rooted in decades of shared history and mutual support. When Uncle James spoke, his words carried the weight of sincerity. Or so we believed. In hindsight, The signs of his financial instability were there, but they were subtle, overshadowed by his charm and our trust. He mentioned struggles now and then, hints about the economy, bad investments, the rising costs of living, but they were always presented as temporary setbacks. Nothing a good next move couldn't fix. So when Uncle James offered to sell a hectare of his land to my parents in 2013, it seemed like a golden opportunity. The land was located on the outskirts of our town, a lush expanse of green that bordered a small forest. My parents had always dreamed of owning more land, perhaps starting a small organic farm or building a few holiday cottages to rent out. The land my uncle offered seemed perfect for such dreams. The deal was straightforward, or so it seemed. Uncle James explained that he was selling the land because he needed liquidity to fund my cousin's college education. He painted a vivid picture. The land, once developed, could be the foundation of our family's financial security. My parents, eager to invest in our future and to help my uncle, agreed to buy it. The price was reasonable, the terms favorable, and the paperwork appeared to be in order, except for one detail. The Red Book, the official document proving land ownership, was still under the bank's hold due to a small loan my uncle had taken out. With reassurances from Uncle James that the loan would be cleared within a year, my parents proceeded. He crafted a promissory note, a casual yet seemingly earnest document, wherein he vowed to clear the debt and transfer the Red Book to my parents as soon as possible. Trusting him, they paid him the money, believing that the formalities were just a formality. Months turned into a year, and the promised Red Book did not materialize. My parents grew anxious, but each inquiry was met with reassurances and new promises from Uncle James. He always had a reason for the delay: paperwork snafus, bank errors, bureaucratic red tape. But his charm and our family's trust in him kept my parents from pressing too hard. This pattern continued until late 2018. That was when everything changed. The financial bubble that Uncle James had been inflating burst with shocking consequences. It turned out that the initial loan against the land was just the tip of an iceberg. Uncle James had been drowning in debt, far more than he had disclosed. In a desperate move, he had taken out further loans against the land, each one a deeper cut into the trust my parents had placed in him. The final blow came abruptly. Uncle James declared bankruptcy, and within weeks, we learned that he had fled the country. The news was delivered by a bank representative who arrived one crisp autumn morning to place foreclosure signs around the hectare that we thought was ours. The bank explained that the land was heavily mortgaged, far beyond its worth, and would be seized to cover my uncle's debts. The revelation shattered my parents. The betrayal by someone they had trusted so deeply was a wound that went beyond financial loss. My father particularly felt deceived and humiliated. He had advocated for the deal, swayed by my mother's trust in her brother and by the dreams they had harbored for that piece of land. The loss was not just a plot of earth, it was a future they had envisioned and promised to us. As the legal realities settled in, so did the bitterness. My father's sense of betrayal morphed into a festering anger that found its easiest outlet in my mother, who, despite being a victim herself, bore the brunt of his accusations and grief. The man who had once been the life of our family gatherings was now a source of tension and despair. In this new harsh light, every memory of Uncle James was recast. The laughter and gifts, once signs of his generosity, now seemed part of a facade that hid his deceit. His stories, once enchanting, now felt like manipulations. The trust that had once bound our family to him had turned into a chain that dragged us down into a mire of betrayal and regret. The descent into despair was gradual at first, like the slow setting of the sun before darkness fully takes hold. My father, once a pillar of strength and joy in our household, succumbed to the weight of his disillusionment. His days began and ended with the bitter tang of alcohol, the bottles accumulating like silent markers of his decline. He no longer tended to his business, a small landscaping company that had flourished due to his love for nature and his dedication to his craft. Instead, he let calls go unanswered, projects unfinished, and slowly, the vibrant man who had raised me with laughter and lessons in resilience, succumbed to a listless apathy. It was not just the loss of the land that broke him, but the betrayal by his own brother-in-law, and the crushing responsibility of having convinced my mother to trust her brother. In his eyes, his failure was twofold. Not only had he failed to protect our financial future, but he had also placed his faith in a man who destroyed us. This sense of failure consumed him, leading him to relinquish all his hard work as if in surrender to an unseen foe. He wandered through his days like a ghost, his presence marked more by the trail of empty bottles than by any interaction with us. My mother bore the brunt of this transformation. The sharp edge of my father's tongue turned against her in his darkest moments. He accused her of complicity, of knowing her brother's intentions and yet leading us into ruin. His words were like daggers, and they sliced through the fabric of her self-worth every day. "Your family is a bunch of scammers," he would shout, the alcohol fueling his anger. turning it into a wildfire that consumed any remnants of peace within our home. Despite the onslaught, my mother's resilience was something to behold. She absorbed the verbal blows with a kind of stoic grace, her eyes often wet with unshed tears, but her posture remained unbroken. She became the buffer between my father's wrath and the rest of us, especially for Alex, my younger brother, who was just entering his teenage years amidst our family's crisis. Alex's rebellion against the situation was fierce and protective. He could not bear to see our mother demeaned and insulted. His confrontations with our father began as verbal skirmishes, challenging the unfairness of his accusations, defending our mother's honor with a boldness that both scared and awed me. "Stop blaming Mom, she didn't do anything wrong," he would yell back, his young voice cracking under the strain of his emotions. These clashes often escalated until the house felt like a battlefield, the air so thick with tension it was hard to breathe. Witnessing these exchanges tore at me. I was caught in a relentless storm of emotions, anger at my uncle for his deceit, despair over my father's downfall, and a deep gnawing pain for my mother's suffering. Each evening, as I heard my father's slurred accusations and my brother's desperate defenses, I felt a part of my heart crumble. The helplessness was overwhelming. I was a spectator in my own life, watching the people I loved tear each other apart. My mother, amidst this chaos, tried to maintain some semblance of normalcy. She went about her daily routines, cooking meals that none of us had the heart to eat, cleaning a house that no longer felt like a home, and trying, always trying, to mediate between my father and brother. Her efforts were Herculean, and yet, I could see the toll it took on her. The circles under her eyes grew darker each day, her smiles more forced and fleeting. She often pulled me aside, her hands clutching mine with a desperation that was hidden from the others. "Take care of your studies, Mary. Don't worry about us," she would whisper, her voice trembling. But how could I not worry? How could I focus on college applications and exams when home was a place of war? The weight of her suffering became my constant companion. I lay awake at night, listening to the echoes of their arguments, and wondered how much more we could withstand. The fear of the phone ringing with news of something worse kept me on edge, a perpetual anxiety that gnawed at my concentration, my peace. In those moments when the house finally quieted down, I would find my mother in the living room, staring out the window. Sometimes I joined her, sitting in silence as we both lost ourselves in the world outside. It was during one of these silent vigils that she finally broke down and shared her deepest fears. "I'm scared, Mary," she confessed, her voice a whisper. "Scared that he'll never forgive me. Scared of losing you and Alex to this hatred." Her admission shattered the last barriers I had put up to protect myself. I realized then that my role wasn't just to be a bystander. I needed to be her ally, Alex's support, and perhaps, find a way to reach my father. But the path to healing seemed obscured by the thick fog of past mistakes and present pain. Life at home had become a landscape of suspicion and bitterness. My father's distrust had deepened to a point where even the simplest acts of familial kindness were scrutinized and tainted with accusations. My mother's occasional visits to her mother's house, or her attempts to maintain some semblance of connection with her parents through gifts or phone calls, were not spared from my father's critical eye. He saw these gestures not as acts of love but as betrayals. Further proof of conspiracies woven in his mind. One chilly afternoon, I returned from school to find the house unusually cold and quiet. My mother sat at the kitchen table, her face weary and lined with fresh worries. She looked up as I entered, managing a weak smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She had been to visit Grandma, who was unwell, and had brought her some homemade soup and a warm blanket. When my father had learned of this, he exploded in rage, accusing her of wasting our scarce resources on her family, whom he now viewed almost as enemies. "Doesn't matter what I do, it's always wrong in his eyes," she confided in me, her voice breaking. "But I can't just stop caring for my mom, Mary. I can't." The situation with the phone calls was even worse. Every ring stirred a palpable tension in the air. My father, often fueled by his drunken stupor, would accuse my mother of conspiring with her brother, my uncle, despite my uncle having disappeared years ago. He couldn't seem to grasp that no one in the family had heard from him since he fled, leaving us to deal with the fallout of his actions. Each call, no matter the caller, seemed to him a ghostly echo of past betrayals, a reminder of the trust that had been broken and the financial security that had been stolen from us. Despite these overwhelming pressures, my mother continued to shoulder the responsibility of not just trying to keep our family together, but also ensuring that my two sisters and I could continue our education. My sisters, both younger than me, were in high school, facing their own battles with the ripple effects of our family's crisis. The cost of education was a constant worry, but my mother was determined that the chaos at home would not derail our futures. Seeing her struggle, I made the decision to take on a part-time job alongside my studies. I was now a freshman at a local community college, having chosen a school close to home to reduce expenses and stay near my family. My days were a blend of classes, studying, and working late shifts at a nearby cafe. Every paycheck I received went partly to help out at home and partly to cover my own educational expenses. This dual role of student and financial contributor was exhausting. There were nights I came home so tired that I could barely make it through dinner before falling asleep over my textbooks. Yet, seeing my mother's quiet gratitude and the way she fought to keep us all moving forward gave me the strength to keep going. She managed our meager finances with a precision and care that was nothing short of heroic, stretching every dollar to cover not just school fees, but the basic necessities of life. Her resilience was our family's unsung melody, a quiet background score that pushed us all to persevere. My mother never complained about her lot, accepting each day's troubles with a resolve that was both heartbreaking and inspiring. Her love for us was an unspoken promise, a commitment that she lived out by enduring the harsh words and the colder silences from my father. My younger sisters, witnessing all this, grew in their own resilience. We became a team, albeit a silent one, finding comfort in shared glances and quiet conversations away from the storms that frequently brewed in our living room. We helped each other with homework, shared responsibilities around the house, and saved little surprises for our mother. Like the time we all chipped in to buy her a new book by her favorite author, hiding it under her pillow to find after a particularly hard day. In these moments, we found our pockets of peace, small oases of normalcy in a desert of chaos. My father's outbursts and suspicions became the storms we learned to weather, building stronger shelters in our bonds with each other. Each challenge, while painful, forged us into more than just siblings and a mother. It made us allies in a struggle that none of us had chosen, but all of us were determined to survive. As I lay in bed each night, listening to the faint sounds of the house settling, I thought about my mother's sacrifices and my father's pain. The journey was far from easy, and many days, the burden of what we were enduring seemed too much to bear. But in the strength of my mother's unwavering love and the shared resolve of my sisters, I found a flicker of hope that perhaps, someday, we might find a way through the darkness, back to a place where love and trust could bloom once more in our family garden. It was a typical Thursday afternoon, the cafe bustling with the usual crowd of students and local professionals grabbing their midday coffee fix. As a waiter, I navigated through the tables with practiced ease, balancing trays filled with steaming beverages and the cafe's signature pastries. The hum of conversations mixed with the clatter of cups created a familiar soundtrack to my shifts. It was amidst this cacophony that I caught a glimpse of something, or rather someone, that froze me in my tracks. From the corner of my eye, I noticed a figure outside the large front window, a silhouette that was hauntingly familiar. The posture, the way he carried himself, it was unmistakably reminiscent of someone I had hoped to forget. My heart skipped a beat as I told myself it couldn't possibly be him. My uncle, the man responsible for so much of my family's misery, had reportedly fled abroad, a cowardly escape from the financial and emotional wreckage he had caused. Surely I was mistaken. But as the figure approached and entered through the cafe's front door, the reality of his identity became undeniable. It was indeed my uncle. The shock of seeing him there, in flesh and blood, after all the rumors of his departure overseas, left me rooted to the spot. Time seemed to slow as he casually strolled up to the counter, oblivious to the storm of emotions his presence had stirred in me. Dressed incongruously in a crisply tailored suit that seemed to mock the ruin he had left behind, he appeared not only unscathed by the ordeal, but prosperous. The fabric of his coat was fine, clearly expensive, with a sheen that caught the light as he moved. His shoes were polished to a mirror shine, and he wore a watch that glinted under the cafe's overhead lights, a stark contrast to the image of a bankrupt fugitive. As he ordered his coffee, chatting amiably with my co-worker, a surge of anger welled up inside me. Here was the man who had betrayed his own sister, my mother, leaving her to shoulder the burden of his deceit. Her life had become a daily struggle to maintain some semblance of normalcy for us, her children, while he seemingly enjoyed the freedom purchased at our expense. My hands trembled slightly as I took in the sight of him, so at ease, so removed from the consequences of his actions. How could he stroll into my workplace, a place just a stone's throw from the school where I studied and worked to support my family because of the financial mess he had created? The unfairness of it all, the injustice, burned through me. I felt profound sorrow for my mother. She had aged visibly in the past few years, each day etching more lines of worry and exhaustion onto her face. Her nights were restless, often spent in tearful worry, her dreams haunted by the fallout of trusting her brother. And here he was, dressed in a suit that likely cost more than what she could spare on groceries in a month. As my uncle took a seat with his coffee, I wrestled with what to do next. Confronting him was my first instinct. To unleash the pent-up frustration, to tell him about the suffering his actions had continued to cause. Yet, as I watched him, a middle-aged man enjoying his coffee, seemingly content with his world, doubt crept in. What could a confrontation realistically achieve? After a few moments of internal debate, I approached his table, my resolve firming with each step. "Uncle James," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. He looked up, his expression one of mild surprise that shifted quickly to recognition. And fleetingly, something that might have been guilt. "Mary," he replied, his tone cautious. "It's been a long time. You've grown." "Yes," I said, the words tasting bitter. "A lot has changed since you left." We talked then, or rather, I spoke while he listened. I told him about the hardships we faced, about my father's decline, and my mother's silent resilience. I spoke of the responsibilities that had fallen onto my shoulders far too early, the dreams that had to be adjusted, and the family fabric that had been torn apart. He offered explanations, some semblance of regret, though whether it was genuine or not, I couldn't say. He spoke of bad luck and worse choices, of his own losses and regrets. But no apology could undo the damage, no words could reclaim the years of pain and hardship his deceit had wrought upon us. The conversation ended with no dramatic resolution, no promises of restitution. He left, and I returned to my duties, the encounter leaving a mix of sadness and catharsis. I hadn't changed anything, not really. But speaking my truth had lightened something within me. The afternoon had taken a turn I could never have anticipated. After meeting with my uncle at the cafe, I returned home filled with a mix of emotions. It felt important to share the encounter with my mother, to relay not just his words but the sheer normalcy with which he had presented himself. My mother listened quietly, her expression somber, absorbing every detail with a heavy heart. As I spoke, her eyes reflected a deep sadness, a well of emotions that seemed too vast and complex for words. She was silent for a long time, the air between us filled with unspoken thoughts and lingering heartache. It was a silence that spoke volumes, resonating with the weight of all we had endured, all that had been broken and lost because of my uncle's actions. Suddenly, the fragile quiet was shattered by a loud, angry voice. My father, who had been out of sight but not out of earshot, stormed into the room. His face was flushed with anger, his eyes alight with the kind of fiery intensity that had become all too familiar. He had overheard everything, and the information acted like fuel on the already burning fire of his resentment. Without a moment's hesitation, he launched into a tirade. The words were harsh and unforgiving, aimed indiscriminately at my mother, my uncle, and all her relatives. He accused them once again of conspiracy and betrayal, his voice rising to a crescendo of fury and frustration. The pain and bitterness he felt towards my uncle were now tangled with a renewed sense of betrayal, knowing that my uncle was back and living seemingly without consequence. In his rage, he turned towards a shelf in our living room, one that held various family dishes and heirlooms, and began to smash them one by one onto the floor. The sound of shattering porcelain filled the room, each crash a hammer blow to the already fragile peace of our household. My mother's face crumpled in despair at the sight, her hands trembling as she covered her mouth to stifle her sobs. I stood frozen for a moment, shocked and scared by the intensity of my father's outburst. The room felt smaller somehow, as if each broken piece of dishware was a fragment of our family's unity, irretrievably damaged. Amidst the chaos I found my voice, albeit shaky, and tried to intervene. "Dad, please stop. This isn't helping anything," I pleaded, my own voice edged with desperation. But my words seemed to fuel his anger further. He turned his wrath towards me, accusing me of siding with traitors, and questioning my loyalty to our family. The accusations were like slaps to the face, harsh and stinging. I struggled to maintain my composure, to stand strong in the face of the storm. My mother, amidst her tears, tried to calm him, reaching out to touch his arm in a plea for peace. But he was beyond consolation, caught up in his own spiral of anger and hurt. The situation escalated until, finally, exhausted and spent, he left the room, leaving behind a trail of emotional and physical wreckage. The aftermath was a heavy silence, the air thick with the scent of dust and broken porcelain. My mother sank into a chair, her body racked with quiet sobs. I moved to her side, wrapping my arms around her in a silent offer of comfort and solidarity. Together, we mourned not just the dishes or even the peace of our afternoon, but something deeper. The loss of what our family had once been, the easy love and trust that had seemed unbreakable. In that moment of shared grief, my thoughts turned anxiously towards my younger brother Alex. Known for his fiery temper and fierce protectiveness of our mother, I prayed he would stay away until the storm had passed. The last thing we needed was for him to come home and confront our father in his current state. The potential for violence was too great, the stakes too high. I didn't want this family conflict to escalate into something even more destructive. As we sat there, my mother and I, in the quiet aftermath, a profound sadness settled over me. It was a sadness for her, for all she had to endure. For my father, lost to his bitterness, and for Alex, who should have been spared from adult conflicts. I felt an overwhelming urge to protect them all, to somehow mend the fractures that had splintered through our family's foundation. But as I held my mother, feeling the tremble of her sobs, I knew that some things were beyond my ability to repair. The damage was done, the scars too deep. All I could do was offer my support, my love, and my presence, and hope that somehow, it would be enough to help us navigate through the wreckage of our shared past into a future that, despite everything, I still hoped could hold some measure of peace and reconciliation. The morning after the turmoil at home, I found myself at the coffee shop, mechanically performing my duties but with my mind elsewhere. The image of my father's wrathful destruction and my mother's silent tears haunted me, playing over in my mind like a nightmarish loop. Despite the busy morning rush, a part of me remained disengaged, distant. It was during this haze of distraction that I noticed a familiar figure through the shop's window. My father was outside, walking back and forth along the street, his eyes scanning the faces of passers-by. Unlike his usual disheveled appearance marked by the telltale signs of his drunken escapades, today he was sober, his movements deliberate. The stark difference in his demeanor piqued my curiosity and concern. It wasn't long before I realized he was probably looking for my uncle, the man who had set off the chain of events that had led our family to this precipice. Compelled by a mix of worry and a desperate need to understand, I asked my manager if I could leave work early. Once outside, I kept a cautious distance, trailing behind my father as he continued his seemingly aimless search. After some time, he stopped at a small convenience store to buy a bottle of water. With the bottle in hand, he walked to a quieter part of the street, away from the bustling crowd. There he squatted down and took a swig of water. It was then that I saw a vulnerability in him that I had never witnessed before, 2 lines of tears streaming down his face. Watching him at that moment, I felt a wave of conflicting emotions. Just the day before, he had been a tempest, a force of anger and destruction. Now, he seemed diminished, broken, crying like a child lost in a world too harsh and unforgiving. The sight of his tears, so raw and exposed, stirred in me a profound sadness. I wondered about the immense burden he must be carrying, the sheer weight of betrayal from a family member he had trusted implicitly. I didn't approach him. Instead, I turned away, allowing him his moment of private sorrow, and started the walk home, my own tears blurring my vision as I grappled with the pain of our fractured family. What had we done to deserve such a fate? The question echoed in my mind, each step towards home heavy with the gravity of our collective heartache. On impulse, I decided to take a detour to my grandmother's house. I needed a respite. A moment to gather strength from someone who might understand the depth of what we were facing. My grandmother welcomed me with her usual warmth, her keen eyes quick to see the distress in mine. As we sat together, I shared the events of the past few days, and in turn, she offered me insights into my father that I had not fully appreciated before. She spoke of the land, the piece of earth that had promised so much hope and potential. For my father, that land was not merely an investment, it was a testament to his dedication to providing for his family, a tangible representation of his love and commitment to our future. He had poured not just his money, but his dreams into that soil, dreams of security and prosperity for my sisters and me. It was supposed to be our legacy, a stable and secure foundation upon which we could build our lives. Your father has always wanted the best for you girls, my grandmother said, her voice tinged with emotion. He saw that land as a way to ensure you all had opportunities he never had. Losing it, especially the way we did, broke him more than you might realize. Her words shed light on the depth of my father's despair. It wasn't just anger or betrayal that fueled his actions. It was a profound sense of loss, not only of the land but of his role as our provider, of his identity as the man of the house. The loss had unmoored him, and what we saw, the rage, the helplessness, was his struggle to grapple with this new reality. As I listened to my grandmother, I felt a renewed sense of empathy for my father. Understanding the magnitude of his hopes and how deeply he felt their collapse helped me see past the fury and the broken dishes. It didn't excuse his actions, but it helped explain them, framing his outbursts as cries of pain rather than expressions of inherent cruelty. In the midst of our family's turmoil, as I watched the strain and sadness inflicted upon us by my uncle's deceit and my father's subsequent unraveling, I often found myself wrestling with conflicting emotions about what paths my mother should take. There were moments, many moments, when I felt that the only solution for her, and perhaps for all of us, was to sever ties with my father. The man who once filled our home with laughter and security had become a source of pain and instability. It seemed logical, perhaps even necessary, for her to consider divorce as a viable path to peace. Yet despite my suggestions and perhaps even pleas, my mother never took that step. For a long time, I couldn't understand her decision. To me, it looked like an endless cycle of suffering. My father's bitterness and accusations, His thunderous outbursts that shattered more than just the physical tranquility of our home. It all seemed like too much for any one person to bear, especially someone as gentle as my mother. But as time wore on, and I witnessed more of the complexities of human emotions and the deep-seated bonds of marriage, I began to grasp the possible layers of her choice. My mother, with her enduring patience and almost unfathomable strength, perhaps saw beyond the surface of my father's wrath. Beneath his stormy veneer and the alcohol-fueled tirades, there was another man. A man she had loved and chosen to share her life with. A man who had once been the anchor of our family. She understood the depth of his despair, not just at the financial ruin that had befallen us, but at the profound sense of betrayal by his own brother-in-law, a man he had trusted implicitly. This betrayal had not just robbed him of a piece of land. It had robbed him of his dreams for our family's future, of his pride in providing for us, and of his mental peace. Understanding this, my mother likely felt that abandoning my father in his darkest hour would only add to the tragedy of our situation. Her commitment then, was not just to the man he had become but to the man he once was and, perhaps, could be again. It was a choice of compassion over condemnation, of hope over despair. As for my uncle, the architect of our misfortune, my feelings were far less forgiving. The more I pondered on the devastation he had caused, the more a part of me wished him ill. It was a dark thought, and it shamed me at times. Wishing death upon another person, especially a family member, was a heavy, terrible thing. But in my lowest moments, it seemed a fitting end for someone who had so selfishly dismantled the happiness of his own relatives for his gain. Uncle James had not just stolen money. He had stolen our security, our joy, and our ability to look towards the future with hope rather than despair. The fact that he continued to live comfortably, seemingly indifferent to the chaos he had left in his wake, fueled a bitter fire within me. I imagined him facing some form of cosmic justice, where he would finally understand the full weight of the pain he had caused. Leaving my grandmother's house, I felt fortified by a mixture of love and sorrow. The road to healing our family would be long and uncertain, but armed with this new understanding, I felt slightly better equipped to face the challenges ahead. My father's tears and the wreckage at home were not just signs of what we had lost, but also markers of where we needed to begin rebuilding. As I approached our house, the sight of it no longer filled me with dread, but with a resolve. We were broken, yes, but not beyond repair. With each step, I was making a silent vow to myself and to my family. I would not let our story end here, not in anger and despair. Somehow, we would find a way through the pain, guided by the understanding and love that still lingered beneath the scars, waiting to be rediscovered and nurtured back to life. My girlfriend repeatedly deceived me and stole money to gamble. Eventually I couldn't take it anymore, and I kicked my pregnant girlfriend out. My name is David, and I'm 26 years old. Jenna and I first met through mutual friends, and from our initial interactions, it was clear we had a unique connection. She was 22, just starting her career in retail, brimming with an enthusiasm for life that was simply infectious. I worked in IT, had a stable job, and had recently secured a modest but cozy two-bedroom apartment in the city. It wasn't long before Jenna moved in with me, and we began building a life together in that small space I was proud to call home. From the outset, Jenna was adamant about contributing financially. Despite my reservations, given the newness of our relationship, she insisted on paying her share, eager to establish our partnership on equal footing. This insistence seemed to underline her commitment to our relationship and her desire to be responsible and independent. Jenna brought a vibrancy to my life that was hard to miss. Her laughter was infectious, her spirit indomitable. When we were together, it felt like we could conquer any challenge that came our way. This sense of partnership was bolstered when Jenna, amidst her joyous tears, told me she was pregnant. The news brought a new dimension to our relationship. It was no longer just about us, but about the future we were going to build for our growing family. In light of the pregnancy, we began making more concrete plans. The idea of marriage, which had floated in our conversations as a someday thought, suddenly took on immediate importance. We decided to register our marriage soon, ensuring that everything would be in place when our child arrived. The plan was to have a small intimate ceremony after the birth, celebrating our new family in the presence of our closest friends and family. These plans filled our home with a new kind of energy. We started organizing the apartment, turning the spare room into a nursery, picking out colors and themes, and discussing baby names in the evenings. Every step we took was a step toward crafting the life we had envisioned together. However, in the midst of this hopeful planning, the reality of Jenna's financial struggles and her inability to break away from her family's demands remained a looming issue. We knew that addressing these problems was critical, not just for the stability of our relationship, but for the well-being of our child. It began subtly, with Jenna often appearing stressed around the end of the month, her demeanor shadowed by the looming pressure of bills and debts. I knew about her financial commitments, but the depth of her struggles became evident only when certain discrepancies came to light under our shared roof. Initially, Jenna had promised to handle her finances more responsibly, and to contribute regularly to our shared expenses. However, as time passed, her contributions became sporadic, and her excuses grew in frequency. I started noticing more signs of financial distress, unopened bills piled up on the counter, and increasingly frantic phone conversations that she tried to shield from me. Armed with the truth and a heavy heart, I confronted Jenna that evening. It was one of the most challenging conversations of my life. I asked her about the letters, the gambling, and the clothes. At first she tried to deny it, but faced with the evidence, she broke down. Jenna revealed how her family had always relied on her financially. Since securing her first job, she had been the pillar her family leaned on for financial support. This expectation, deeply ingrained from a young age, had burgeoned into a relentless cycle of demands and guilt. Every payday, her phone would light up with messages from her mother or sisters, each one a new plea for money. The reasons varied: rent, medical bills, urgent repairs, or just making ends meet. The amounts she sent home left little for her own needs, let alone our shared expenses. The gambling, she confessed, began as a desperate measure to meet both her family's demands and our household expenses. What started as an attempt to quickly double a small sum spiraled out of control, pulling her deeper into the quagmire of addiction. She described how the thrill of a potential win was soon overshadowed by the despair of consecutive losses, each gamble a further step away from financial stability. The discussion about the stolen clothes was particularly painful. Jenna tearfully admitted that she had taken them to give as gifts to her family, who expected presents even when she couldn't afford them. She was trying to maintain a facade of stability and generosity with them, even while drowning financially. This revelation was a turning point in our relationship. The trust that formed the foundation of our life together had been severely damaged. I felt betrayed and hurt, but also deeply concerned for Jenna. She was caught in a destructive cycle, manipulated by her family's demands, and struggling with a gambling issue that was her misguided solution to financial pressure. After confronting Jenna about her gambling and the financial deceit, I realized that the situation couldn't continue as it was. It was a difficult conversation, one that required laying everything on the table: the deceit, the theft, the gambling, all of it. I told Jenna that for us to move forward, there needed to be complete transparency and a commitment to change. The future of our relationship and the well-being of our soon-to-be expanded family depended on it. Jenna's response was solemn but hopeful. She acknowledged the pain she had caused and expressed her determination to make things right. She agreed to my request to have regular access to her bank statements. It was a practical measure, not one I took any pleasure in demanding, but necessary to rebuild the trust she had broken. She also agreed to set up a strict budget for personal spending, and contribute a fixed amount monthly towards household expenses, directly from her paycheck. The revelations of that day changed everything. Trust, the cornerstone of any relationship, had been deeply eroded. The path ahead was uncertain. Could I trust Jenna again? Could our relationship survive the twin shadows of deceit and addiction? These questions haunted me, but amidst the turmoil, a resolve formed within me. I cared deeply for Jenna, and if there was a chance to salvage our future together, I was willing to try. Update. For a while, things seemed to improve. Jenna appeared more open about her finances, showing me her bank statements without hesitation. She made her contributions to the household consistently, and we even started to have open discussions about money, something that had always been a tension point for us. It felt like we were finally making progress, rebuilding the trust and partnership we had once taken for granted. However, this period of improvement was short-lived. The facade of recovery crumbled one evening about 3 months after our initial confrontation. Jenna had been more withdrawn than usual, a sign I had come to recognize as indicative of underlying stress. While she was in the kitchen, her phone lit up with a notification that caught my eye. Loan accepted by ex-lender, click here to accept. My heart sank. When Jenna returned, I confronted her immediately. The trust I had been cautiously rebuilding shattered with the sight of that message. She broke down, confessing that despite her earlier promises, she had taken out another payday loan. She explained that her expenses had overrun her budget this month, more than she had admitted, and she felt this was her only way out. Her justification did little to assuage the sense of betrayal. I reminded her of our agreement: no more loans, no more secrets. Yet here we were again, facing the same issue of hidden debts and financial irresponsibility. It was a painful realization that despite her promises, Jenna hadn't fully committed to changing her behavior or addressing the underlying issues that led to her financial recklessness. I asked to see her bank statements, something she had agreed to share openly. This time, however, she refused, claiming that I was being controlling, and that she needed to handle her finances independently to truly learn from her mistakes. This refusal was a red flag, indicating that not only was Jenna backsliding, but she was also not ready to fully confront her issues as we had planned. The confrontation that night did not resolve anything. Jenna's reluctance to show her bank statements and her decision to take out another loan without discussing it with me first showed that our earlier resolutions were superficial. The underlying issues, her handling of financial pressure, her dependency on quick fixes like loans, and her inability to resist impulses to spend, remained unaddressed. The tension in the air was palpable as I confronted Jenna about the latest incident, the missing cash and the money ostensibly used to pay for the sofa that had been sold to her mother. It was a few weeks after Jenna had moved back in a bid to provide stability for our soon-to-arrive baby. However, the peace was short-lived. I had discovered that a substantial amount of cash, money that was a gift and meant for our future needs, particularly with the baby on the way, was missing. Compounding this issue was the fact that Jenna's mother had only partially paid for the sofa, despite agreeing to pay the full amount, and now claimed dissatisfaction with its condition as a pretext to delay further payments. When I brought up these issues, Jenna's initial reaction was defensive. She vehemently denied any wrongdoing, claiming ignorance about the missing cash. But the evidence was too concrete, the circumstances too coincidental. The trust I had tried to rebuild was crumbling rapidly under the weight of continual deceit. Her defensiveness quickly turned to accusations. Jenna claimed that my focus on finances and tracking every penny was controlling, that it overshadowed her emotional and physical needs, especially during her pregnancy. She argued that my insistence on transparency and accountability was a form of surveillance, not partnership. The cycle of deceit had not been broken, and the realization was a bitter pill to swallow. The trust that is so crucial in any relationship was once again in jeopardy, and with a baby on the way, the stakes were higher than ever. This was not just about us anymore, it was about the future and stability of our family. The pain of her betrayal was compounded by the fear of how her actions could affect our child. The conversation escalated, emotions running high. I was torn between the hurt from her betrayals and the empathy I felt for her as the mother of my child. It was a moral and emotional quagmire, pulling at the very fibers of my being. How could I balance these feelings with the clear pattern of dishonesty and manipulation that had emerged? Update 2. The problems reached a peak last week when I decided it was time for a serious conversation with Jenna. Our relationship, already strained by her past actions, was at a crossroads, and with a baby on the way, I felt it necessary to establish clear ground rules. I sat her down and explained earnestly that our dynamic needed to change drastically. We're a family, I told her, emphasizing that the birth of our child meant we needed a solid foundation, free from secrets and financial instability. I made it clear that openness about finances was non-negotiable, insisting she needed to contribute more consistently to household expenses and cease accumulating debt she couldn't afford. A habit that had caused much stress and discord in our relationship. Jenna seemed receptive and agreed to my terms. She promised to be more transparent with her finances, including showing me her bank statements regularly, and committed to cutting down on her spending. For a moment, it felt like we were making progress. Perhaps we were finally turning a corner toward a healthier partnership. She moved back in, and I believed that we were starting to mend our relationship. However, this hope was short-lived. Just last night, while Jenna was in the kitchen, a notification popped up on her phone. It was a message from a lender, confirming a loan that had just been approved. My heart sank. It was as if all the promises she had just made were nothing but air. Confronting her immediately, I asked her about the loan. Tears welled up in her eyes as she admitted she had no money left for the month and had resorted to taking out a payday loan. Her confession was a blow to any trust that had been rebuilt. I reminded her sternly that we had agreed on no more loans, that she should have come to me first. Jenna's response was one of despair. She said she couldn't afford her share of the bills again. Despite her full-time job, her income was erratic, often reduced to sick pay due to frequent absences, which didn't cover much. Frustrated, I asked to see her bank statements for proof of her financial status and to understand where her money was going. She refused and accused me of being controlling, arguing that I didn't need to see her finances since she had already told me about them. This refusal was the final straw for me. I suspected that not only was she possibly still gambling, but she might also be funneling money to her family again. In a moment of desperation to highlight the severity of our situation, I posed a hypothetical scenario to her. What would you do if our baby was starving and there was no food in the house? Her answer was dismissive and chilling. You'll have to pay. This response confirmed my worst fears about her priorities. I then asked to check her Facebook Messenger to see if her family was still requesting money, but discovered that she had deleted all her messages with the family members who usually borrowed money from her. She claimed she deleted them to keep things tidy, yet all other messages were intact. At that point, I knew our relationship was beyond repair. Jenna labeled me a controlling freak, and we haven't spoken since. Reflecting on our relationship, I suspect that her issues are deeply rooted in her upbringing, issues that she is either unwilling or unable to confront and change. I know a lot of people questioned whether she's pregnant, how stupid I was to get her pregnant. I agree, and if it's mine. I've been to every scan so I know she's pregnant. As for if it's mine, I've never suspected cheating, but she's a serial liar, so I will be forcing a DNA test through the courts. I posted on a couple of different subs to make sure I wasn't getting biased opinions. The above story is 100% true, but my focus is now getting as far away as possible from her for my own sake. Despite the personal feelings and the breakdown of our relationship, I remain committed to being involved in my child's life. I've attended every prenatal scan and am confident about Jenna's pregnancy. However, given the deceit surrounding other aspects of her life, I'm planning to request a DNA test to eliminate any doubts about paternity. This isn't about trust, it's about ensuring that every step forward is based on transparency and truth. Update 3. A couple of weeks ago, I made the decision to let Jenna back into the house after learning she was bouncing around, staying on sofas at family members' and friends' homes. She was about 8 months pregnant at the time, and my concern was mainly for the well-being of our unborn child. In hindsight, I see this as a mistake, one that I deeply regret for reasons I'm about to share. We had recently moved to a new house, and during the times I was out, Jenna took charge of most of the unpacking. Hidden in a living room cabinet drawer was a significant sum of cash, approximately $400–500, a Christmas gift from my parents. During this period, I also decided to sell some old furniture, including a sofa that Jenna persistently asked me to sell to her mother. Despite my reservations, I agreed, influenced by Jenna's repeated requests. She explained that her mother wanted to borrow money to pay for the sofa, and would settle the payment a couple of weeks later. I didn't think much of it at the time and accepted the arrangement. When her mother came to collect the sofa, she handed me $100 in cash as an initial payment, promising the remainder the following week. However, when the time came, not only did she fail to pay, but she also complained that the sofa had collapsed and demanded that I inspect it. I refused, stating the sofa was in good condition when she took it, and if she was unsatisfied, I would take it back and sell it to someone else. This led to a heated exchange where she barred me from her house. My girlfriend sided with her mother, accusing me of being controlling and unnecessarily involving herself in a family dispute. Later, when I realized the cash was missing from the drawer, I searched the entire house to no avail. Everything else was unpacked, even trivial items like a blown light bulb. When I confronted Jenna about the missing money, she defensively claimed it was somewhere, echoing the vague excuses she had given before. It struck me then, the cash gift was composed of $10 notes, the same denomination as the partial payment for the sofa. I suspected that Jenna had stolen the money to facilitate her mother's partial payment to me, effectively making me pay myself, minus the stolen amount. When confronted, Jenna coldly admitted she might have taken it but dismissed the importance of my feelings or our relationship, stating she didn't care about me anymore. This revelation coincided suspiciously with her recent attempt to take out a new loan, likely around the same time she took the cash. Her actions and her threats to tarnish my reputation to others as retaliation further underscored her manipulative behavior. Despite the absence of concrete proof beyond her reaction, her demeanor provided all the confirmation I needed of her guilt. Moving forward, I've decided to arrange a DNA test once our child is born to ensure clarity on paternity. This step is crucial, not out of distrust of her fidelity, but to establish a factual basis for any future decisions regarding our child's upbringing. Final update. When my son was born last week, it was a pivotal moment that I hoped would herald a fresh start for us as a family. I had arranged for a DNA test, driven by the complex weave of trust issues that had plagued our relationship. When the results confirmed that he was indeed my biological son, a profound sense of relief washed over me. Witnessing the birth of my child and seeing Jenna endure the pain of labor filled me with compassion and reignited feelings of tenderness towards her. In those moments, surrounded by the stark walls of the hospital delivery room, I found myself wanting to believe that we could still salvage our relationship. I thought, perhaps naively, that the birth of our son could be a new beginning, a reason for Jenna to change her destructive habits. Moved by these emotions, I decided to give Jenna another chance, telling myself that love could still overcome the hurdles we faced. After all, aside from the financial deceptions, our love for each other had been genuine and deep. In a bid to support her during her recovery, and to help with the expenses that come with a newborn, I handed her a substantial sum of money to cover the hospital bills and to buy essentials for our son. My family too, rallied around us, offering their support both emotionally and financially. They visited the hospital, bearing gifts and donations to ensure Jenna and our newborn had everything they needed. However, within a week of our son's birth, it became painfully clear that Jenna's old habits were deeply ingrained. Despite the new life we had just welcomed into the world, Jenna slipped back into her old ways. I discovered that the money meant for hospital bills and our son's needs had vanished. After some digging, I learned the bitter truth. Jenna had spent it all at the casinos. Just a week into motherhood, and she was already back to gambling. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. It wasn't just about the money, it was about the trust, the safety of our child, and the responsibilities that come with being parents. Jenna's actions showed a reckless disregard for our son's well-being and a continuation of the selfish behavior that had marked so much of our time together. I felt betrayed on a level I hadn't known before, and anger and hatred began to replace the feelings of sympathy and hope I had felt at the hospital. The conclusion I've come to is a painful but clear one. Jenna is unlikely to change. Her actions have consistently shown a pattern of taking advantage of situations and people, including those closest to her. It was a decisive moment for me. I could no longer allow my son to grow up in an environment where his mother's destructive habits could affect his life so detrimentally. The love I had for Jenna, which had once seemed unshakable, crumbled under the weight of her continued deceit and irresponsibility. I made the difficult decision to separate myself and my son from Jenna. Filing for sole custody was the next logical step. I consulted with a lawyer to understand my options and to ensure that my son would be protected from potential harm. The legal battle that lay ahead would no doubt be challenging, but I was determined to provide a stable and secure environment for my son, one free of the chaos and instability that Jenna brought into our lives. In parallel with these actions, I started arranging for more structured support systems. I reached out to family and friends, explaining the situation and garnering their support for what was to come. Their responses were a mix of dismay and determination to help us get through this. I also began attending counseling, to deal with the resentment and betrayal I felt, ensuring that these emotions wouldn't taint the relationship I wanted to build with my son. As I reflect on our relationship and its tumultuous end, I realize how deeply Jenna's actions have scarred me. Yet this ordeal has also clarified what truly matters. My focus now is entirely on my son. His happiness, his future, and his well-being. The journey ahead will be filled with challenges, but also with the joy of watching my son grow, unhindered by the shadows of a troubled relationship. The love I had for Jenna might never fully disappear, but the need to protect my son from her harmful behaviors supersedes all else. As I move forward, my resolve is strengthened by the knowledge that I am doing what is best for my child. The path I've chosen is not just for my own peace but for the upbringing of a child away from the instability and destructiveness of a gambler's life. My son deserves a chance at a better life, and I am committed to making that a reality. Reflecting on the relationship, I recognize the profound impact it had on my life. It was a stark lesson in the complexities of love and trust, and the painful realities of betrayal. I had gone into the relationship with hope and love, which were met with deception and heartache. Yet these experiences shaped my understanding of what I value in relationships and what I must guard against. My husband and my best friend had an affair. I pretended to be a room attendant to catch them. My life, as I knew it, was unremarkably happy, a sentiment that, though plain, encapsulated all I held dear. I had managed to build a family, one that, against odds and through challenges, felt both complete and complex in its everyday normalcy. My husband James, a charming and spirited man of 39, stood at the center of my universe. Our journey together hadn't been straightforward or easy. He had come into our marriage with baggage. A son from his previous marriage and a past tangled with unresolved issues that led to his divorce. His ex-wife had struggled with personal demons, leaving James to shield their son, Lucas, from the fallout. When James and I married 7 years ago, I welcomed both into my life with open arms, embracing Lucas as my own. Now 9, Lucas had grown into a thoughtful, quiet boy, whose moments of laughter were both rare and precious. Lucas lived with us full-time, his presence a constant reminder of the life James had before me, and a life I had willingly stepped into. I treated Lucas with all the affection and care I would my own flesh and blood, and in many ways, he was just that to me. Our bond was strong, despite the initial adjustment and the invisible lines that blended and blurred over time. Then, 3 years after marrying James, we welcomed another boy into our world, Ethan. Ethan, with his father's eyes and an infectious smile, was a living testament to the happiness and love James and I shared. At 5 years old, Ethan was the light of our household, often pulling Lucas into his childish games, which Lucas indulged with a patience that was beyond his years. Our life in a cozy, suburban neighborhood was filled with the typical hustle and bustle of family activities, school events, weekend soccer games, and family dinners that were noisy with chatter and laughter. James, with his job that often put him in the public eye locally, was a well-known figure in our community. This visibility never seemed to affect our quiet home life. Instead, it filled it with a sense of pride. We laughed more than we argued, a balance that I had come to cherish deeply. My best friend Claire had been by my side since our college days. She was married to a wealthy businessman who, while providing a life of luxury, failed to meet her deeper needs, especially in their bedroom. Claire often confided in me about her marital frustrations. Her voice a mixture of envy and despair when she compared her emotional and sexual dissatisfaction with the vibrancy she saw in my marriage. She was always there, a fixture in my life, sharing everything with me as I did with her. Despite her personal discontent, Claire's frequent visits and our daily conversations never hinted at anything amiss. She was Auntie Claire to my boys, a role she relished despite her own lack of desire for children. Her presence was a comfort, an echo of a past that both of us shared and held onto through our transitioning lives. Our families intertwined not out of necessity but choice. Claire and her husband, often joining us for barbecues and birthday parties, seemed just another branch of our extended family tree. These gatherings, filled with laughter and casual joy, painted a picture of harmony. James had always been a loving and attentive husband. His expressions of affection were frequent and heartfelt, whether it was a surprise bouquet of flowers or a simple note left on the fridge saying how much he loved me. But slowly, I began to notice shifts in his behavior that, at the time, seemed insignificant, but now scream with meaning. There were the evenings when James would come home from work, his face drawn, not with the usual fatigue of a long day, but with a pensiveness that seemed to cloud his eyes. When I asked if everything was all right, he would flash me a brief, tight smile and assure me everything was fine, attributing his mood to an especially challenging day. His eyes, once so quick to meet mine, now often diverted away, as if holding my gaze was too much to bear. Then there were the text messages. I remember one night, lying beside him as he typed away on his phone. I glanced over curious about who he was texting so late. He quickly angled the screen away and said it was just a work email he had to respond to urgently. His expression was too calm, practiced, and it prickled my senses with unease, but I pushed those feelings away, chastising myself for being overly suspicious. With Claire the changes were even more pronounced, though cloaked in subtleties that only in retrospect reveal their true weight. She had always been open and vibrant, sharing every detail of her life with an almost brutal honesty. But as the months passed, her vivacity dimmed. She became more reserved, her laughter less frequent, and her visits shorter. When she did come over, her smile didn't quite reach her eyes, and there was a hesitation in her actions, as if she were constantly on the verge of saying something more but thought better of it. I remember one particular afternoon when Claire and I had met for lunch. She seemed unusually distracted, her eyes flicking to her phone every few minutes. I had jokingly asked if she had a secret lover she was keeping from me. She had laughed it off, but there was a flash of something in her expression, a flicker of guilt, perhaps, that made me pause. But then she quickly changed the subject, gushing about a new restaurant she wanted us to try, and the moment passed. Our conversations, once filled with earnest depth, had taken on a superficial quality. She asked about my life, my family, but it was as if she was going through the motions. I shared stories of James and the kids, unaware that each word might be a sting to her conscience. Looking back, I can almost pinpoint the exact moments when her discomfort was most palpable, especially when I talked about James with affection and pride. One evening, the four of us, James, Claire, her husband, and I, had dinner at our place. I noticed how Claire's laughter seemed forced, how she and James accidentally exchanged looks that they both quickly smothered. It was as if they were both in a play, each performing their part but with a falter here and there that only a discerning eye would catch. After they left that night, the air felt charged, heavy with unspoken words and unasked questions. James was unusually quiet, retreating into a shell that I couldn't seem to penetrate. When I asked if he was okay, he brushed it off, mumbling something about being tired. But his eyes avoided mine, and there was a tension in his jaw that hadn't been there earlier. These signs, these tiny cracks in the facade of our daily lives, were there, forming a pattern I only now fully see. The pain of realizing that not only was my husband unfaithful, but that my best friend was his accomplice, cuts deeper than anything I've ever felt. It shakes the very foundation of what I believed my life to be, leaving me to wonder how I missed the signs when they were so clearly there, painting a picture of betrayal right before my eyes. The day I discovered the devastating truth about my husband and my best friend Claire, started like any other. It was a sunny Tuesday, and I was busy organizing the house while Ethan played in the living room. My phone buzzed with the arrival of a message. Expecting it to be a reminder or a message from a family member, I checked it casually, but what I saw was neither. It was an anonymous text, simply stating a hotel name and room number. The sender was unknown, and my heart sank with a dreadful premonition. Confusion and fear mingled with a sharp sting of betrayal as I read and reread the message. Why would someone send me this? Was it a mistake? Or was it something more sinister? Despite every rational part of me screaming to dismiss it, the seed of doubt had been planted. I needed to know the truth. I arranged for my neighbor to watch Ethan, giving some vague excuse about an unexpected errand. My hands shook as I drove to the hotel, the address burning in my mind with every mile that passed. As I parked the car, my breaths were short, each one heavier than the last. I walked to the room, my legs feeling like they could give out at any moment. Standing outside the door, I hesitated. The fear of what I might find on the other side gripped me. But I had to know. I mustered all the courage I had left and knocked softly. "Come in. Why are you taking so long? Help me clean up my spilled wine," a familiar voice called from inside. It was Claire's voice, casual and irritated. My heart pounded against my chest as I pushed the door open, feigning the role of a hotel employee. The scene before me was like a still from a nightmare. My husband, James, was out on the balcony, his back to the room, seemingly caught up in a phone call. Claire was sprawled on the bed, a glass of wine tipped over on the bedside table, its contents staining the crisp white sheets. I bent down, pretending to clean up, my hands trembling as I grasped the cloth. Claire continued to talk, unaware of who I really was. "You know, he's the only one who can satisfy me," she said, a moan of contentment lacing her voice as she referred to my husband. "I've always been so jealous of her, living such a perfect life," she added bitterly. I froze, the cloth in my hand forgotten. Her words echoed in the room, each syllable slicing through me like a blade. She spoke of her husband then, deriding him as physically weak and inadequate. The casual cruelty of her words, the ease with which she dismissed her vows, shook me to my core. I stood my disguise as a cleaner forgotten, as I faced the reality of their betrayal. My presence still unnoticed, I watched as James turned from the balcony, his face lighting up as he saw Claire. The affection in his eyes was unmistakable, and it was not directed at me. Feeling nauseous, I backed away, the room spinning around me. I managed to stumble out before they saw me, my heart breaking with each step. Outside, the cool air hit my face, but it did nothing to ease the heat of my shame, anger, and sorrow. I vomited in the bushes outside the hotel, the physical purging a pathetic echo of the emotional turmoil inside. The drive home was a blur. My mind replayed the scene over and over, each detail a torment. How long had this been going on? How could they do this to me, to us, to our family? The questions spiraled, each one unanswered, each one a further descent into despair. I arrived home to the sound of Ethan laughing as he played. The normalcy of the scene was a stark contrast to the chaos within me. How could I reconcile the world I thought I knew with the deceit I had just witnessed? That night, after Ethan was in bed, I sat alone in the darkness of the living room, waiting for James to come home. The waiting was excruciating, each minute stretching out endlessly. When he finally arrived, his smile faltered at the sight of me, my red-rimmed eyes and pale face undoubtedly telling more than I could say with words. "Is everything all right?" he asked, a note of concern in his voice that now sounded hollow. How could I begin to confront him? How could I explain the agony his actions had caused? The room felt suffocating as I struggled to find the words. The anonymous message from the morning nagged at me. A puzzle piece that didn't fit, its origin still a mystery that I needed to solve. My mind wouldn't allow me to rest, not yet. I slipped out of the bedroom quietly, careful not to disturb James, and made my way to the living room. The house was silent, shadows playing along the walls as the streetlights cast dim glows through the windows. Sitting on the sofa, I pulled out my phone and dialed the anonymous number once more, my heart racing with a mix of dread and determination. The phone rang, cutting through the quiet darkness of the room. It rang longer than I expected, each tone echoing my escalating tension. Then, surprisingly, there was an answer. The voice on the other end was immediately recognizable, though I had never expected to hear it in this context. It was Claire's husband, Mark. "Why did you send me that message?" I asked, my voice a mix of confusion and anger. There was a pause on the line, a hesitation that spoke volumes before Mark even uttered a word. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, tinged with a bitterness that I hadn't heard before. "I thought it was time you knew the truth," he said simply, yet the weight of his words felt heavy and complex. "When did you find out?" I pressed on, needing to understand why he, of all people, would be the one to inform me. I've had my suspicions for a while, Mark confessed, his tone resigned. I confirmed it a few days ago. I saw them together, much like you did today. The revelation stung. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was the casualness of their deceit, how it seemed to unravel so easily to those looking closely enough. Why tell me this way? Why not confront Claire or even James? I asked, my voice cracking with the strain of the day's emotions. Mark sighed, a sound of deep weariness traveling through the line. Because Claire has never been honest with me, not really. I knew she married me for my money, but I thought maybe there was something more, eventually. I wanted to hurt her the way she hurt me, by ripping apart the facade she's been living with you, with everyone. His words revealed a pain and a vindictiveness that made me shudder. It was a retaliation meant to wound deeply, indiscriminately. But did you think about how this would affect me, my family? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, my grip tightening around the phone. I did, he admitted, and his voice softened slightly. And I'm sorry for the collateral damage. I didn't want to hurt you or your kids. You deserve better than this, all of you do. I couldn't see any other way to make her feel the consequences of her actions. The conversation drifted into an awkward silence, both of us lost in our own turmoil. Here was a man, broken by betrayal, lashing out in his pain, and here was I, a casualty of his revenge. It was too much to take in, too cruel and tangled to fully comprehend in the shadow of my own heartbreak. Is that supposed to make me feel better? I finally said. Not expecting an answer, not really wanting one either. No, I guess not, Mark responded, his voice a mix of resignation and sorrow. But maybe, in time, we can both find some peace, knowing the truth. Maybe we can rebuild something from the ruins, even if it's not what we had before. The line went dead then, and I was left with the echoes of our conversation. The night stretched on, endless and heavy. Mark's motives, though fueled by his own pain, had thrust me unwillingly into the role of avenger in his marital drama, exposing wounds in my life that might never fully heal. I sat there for a long time, the phone still in my hand, staring into the darkness. The truth was out, a bitter pill that offered no real comfort, only more questions and the daunting task of navigating what was left of my marriage and my friendship. As dawn began to break, the first light casting a pale glow into the room, I knew that the path ahead was uncertain. Forgiveness seemed as distant as the fading stars, and trust, once broken, loomed as a colossal challenge to rebuild. But in that moment of early morning clarity, I realized that whatever decisions lay ahead, they would start with facing the day, and the consequences, head on. I woke up from an uneasy slumber, a night marred by turmoil and haunted by the echoes of betrayal. The weight of discovery sat heavy on my chest, making it hard to breathe, hard to think. Despite the unrest, I had made a decision the previous night. I needed to talk to James, face to face, to resolve this excruciating mess we found ourselves in. I wanted answers, needed closure, or at least the beginning of a conversation about where we stood. My plan was to meet him tonight, after the kids were asleep, a time we could talk undisturbed. With this resolve, I reached for my phone to text him, a simple message to confirm our talk. But as the screen lit up, I was met not with the quiet icons of my home screen, but with notifications flooding in. A storm of alerts and messages that immediately set my nerves on edge. Curiosity mixed with dread, I opened the social media app to find the source of the commotion. There, on my feed, was something so shockingly personal and devastating that it knocked the wind out of me. A video, unmistakably featuring James and Claire, in a very compromising, intimate scene. It was posted by an anonymous account, but the content was explicit, leaving no room for doubt about what it depicted, or who was involved. The reality that our private agony was now public spectacle was paralyzing. I knew immediately it was Mark's doing. His previous actions, the pain in his voice last night, painted a clear picture of a man driven to the edge by heartbreak and betrayal. His method of exposing the affair, so raw and cruel, was the act of someone consumed by revenge, not just intent on reclaiming his dignity, but on destroying everything in his path. As I stared at the screen, numb and disbelieving, my phone began to ring, jolting me from the shock. It was relentless, buzzing again and again, vibrating with an urgency that mirrored the chaos now exploding around me. Journalists, friends, acquaintances, news of this scandal was spreading like wildfire, and everyone wanted a piece of the drama, a comment, a reaction. Oh my God, I murmured to the empty room. Everything was falling apart, unraveling faster than I could have ever anticipated. The conversation I had planned with James, meant to be a private affair to mend or end what was left of our marriage, was now irrelevant. The world had intruded, cruel and uninvited, into our lives. My heart raced as I tried to process the rapid collapse of my privacy and personal life. This video, This vile breach of our intimate moments changed everything. There was no room now for quiet discussions or contemplative reconciliations. The issue demanded immediate attention, not just as a personal betrayal but as a public spectacle that was spiraling out of control. With shaking hands I dialed James's number. He answered quickly, his voice tense, aware already of the digital wildfire consuming our lives. "Have you seen it?" was all I could ask, my voice a mix of anger, sadness, and disbelief. "Yes, I've seen it," he replied, his voice heavy with regret and something else. Fear, perhaps. "I'm so sorry. This isn't how I wanted." "How you wanted what, James? For me to find out? For everything to end?" I cut him off, unable to contain the torrent of emotions. "It's everywhere. Our friends, family, everyone has seen it. How do we even begin to handle this?" There was a pause, heavy and laden with the weight of our crumbling world. "I'm coming home. We need to talk, face to face. We need to figure out what to do about everything." The call ended, leaving me in a turmoil of thoughts and emotions. I knew that whatever came next would be incredibly challenging. Facing the public humiliation, dealing with the betrayal, and navigating the fallout with our children and our families, there was no easy path forward. The hours until James's return were agonizing. I sat, enveloped in a haze of anxiety and betrayal, trying to brace myself for the confrontation to come. How do you confront a betrayal that's become a public circus? How do you reclaim any sense of normalcy when your private life has been laid bare for all to see? When James finally walked through the door that evening, the look on his face told me he was as devastated by the exposure as I was by the betrayal. We sat across from each other, the weight of unspoken words heavy between us. This wasn't just about us anymore, it was about our children, our families, and the indelible marks this scandal would leave on all our lives. The conversation that followed was painful but necessary. We discussed immediate steps to protect our privacy, ways to handle the media, and most importantly, how to address this with our children. We talked about the potential for legal action against Mark for the invasion of privacy and the dissemination of the video. Through it all, the need for decisions about the future of our marriage loomed large. But those decisions were for another day. Right now, we needed to manage the crisis at hand, to protect our family from further fallout, and to begin the arduous process of healing, whatever that might look like. After James had come home and we'd begun to tentatively address the fallout from the scandal that was now openly unfolding, I knew there was one more call I needed to make. Despite the raw emotions and the deep sense of betrayal, I needed to contact Mark. The urgency to protect what little remained of our family's privacy propelled me into action. I found a quiet corner in the chaos of our home, my hands trembling as I dialed Mark's number. The phone rang, each tone echoing in the emptiness of the room, magnifying my anxiety. When he finally answered, his voice was cold, distant. "Mark, please," I started, my voice pleading. "You have to take down the video. Think about my sons. Think about what this will do to them if they see it." There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear him weighing his options, his breath a soft but audible intake. "I posted that video for a reason." Mark's voice was resolute, tinged with the bitterness that had likely driven him to expose the affair so publicly. "I understand you're hurt," I continued, fighting to keep my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. "But my children have nothing to do with this. They are innocent. Please, don't let them suffer because of our mistakes." Mark's reply was a sigh, long and weary. "You think I want to hurt children?" he asked, his tone softening slightly. "You think I haven't thought about that?" "I know you're angry, and you have every right to be," I said, trying to connect with the part of him that had once been our friend, before all this bitterness took hold. "But please, reconsider what this will do to them. They could lose friends, be bullied. Their whole world could change. And once something is on the internet, it's there forever." There was another silence, longer this time. I held my breath, waiting, hoping that my words had reached him, had reminded him of the man who used to come to our home, who had laughed and dined with us, who wasn't this person consumed by revenge. Finally he spoke again, his voice less certain than before. "I don't want to hurt your kids, I don't," he admitted, and his words seemed to carry a weight of realization, as if seeing the broader impact of his actions for the first time. "But Claire and James, they did this, not me. They did, and they are dealing with it," I assured him, my voice firm. "But our children shouldn't have to. Please, Mark, do this for them. Take the video down." We talked a little more. I told him about Ethan's recent school achievements, how he was just starting to really enjoy his soccer games. I mentioned Lucas's quiet strength, how he had been dealing with so much already between the complexities of his blended family life and normal childhood challenges. With each word, I hope to humanize the situation, to bring it back from the abstract online world to the very real, very affected lives of these two little boys. Mark finally conceded, his voice a mixture of defeat and clarity. Okay, he said. I'll take it down. Not for James or Claire, but for the kids. I thanked him, relief flooding through me, though tempered by the knowledge of the lingering effects of his initial decision. We ended the call on a note of strained civility, the connection forever altered but with a sliver of respect for his final choice to protect my children. After hanging up, the relief was palpable, but so was the gravity of what still lay ahead. The video might be taken down, but the damage was done. Rumors had been ignited, conversations started, and the digital footprint, though now less traceable, would never be completely erased. The task of facing our friends, family, and especially our children with the truth loomed large. How to explain such adult failures to such young minds was a puzzle I was still piecing together. The forthcoming days would require careful navigation, as James and I would need to shield our sons from as much fallout as possible, while also preparing to answer their questions with honesty appropriate for their age. In the wake of the scandal that crumbled the facade of my once seemingly perfect life, the days that followed were some of the most challenging I had ever faced. The very foundation of my existence, my marriage, had been irrevocably altered by betrayal, and the aftermath was a painful navigation through a landscape I hardly recognized. The morning after I successfully persuaded Mark to take down the incriminating video, James approached me with a solemnity that was uncharacteristic of the man I had known. He held a set of divorce papers in his hands, his eyes avoiding mine as he placed them gently on the kitchen table where we had shared countless family meals and light-hearted conversations. I think it's best if we do this, he said quietly, his voice strained. I don't deserve your forgiveness or your feelings anymore. The finality in his voice cut through the air, sharper than any words he had uttered the night before. I looked at the papers, a cold, hard reality settling over me. Despite the tumult of emotions, a part of me had clung to the hope of reconciliation, not just for our sake but for our sons. But in that moment, as I watched James, defeated and resigned, I understood that our path forward needed to be apart. With a heavy heart, I signed the papers, each stroke of my name a silent testament to the years we had shared and the future we would not. I didn't contest much. I just asked for primary custody of our sons, ensuring they would have stability and continuity in their lives as much as possible. James agreed without hesitation, the guilt etching deeper lines into his face. Once everything was settled legally, I took our youngest son, Ethan, and moved to a nearby apartment. It was a modest place but filled with potential for a new beginning, a space just for us, away from the shadows of past betrayals. Meanwhile, Claire's life unraveled in ways more dramatic and public than I could have imagined. After her affair with James and the subsequent fallout, Mark, driven by a blend of betrayal and vindication, ensured that Claire would not benefit from their divorce. Armed with evidence of her adultery, he barred her from claiming any significant part of his considerable wealth. Last I heard, she was sent away empty-handed, a fitting end to her duplicitous maneuvers. But Claire's descent didn't stop there. Recently the news broke that she had been arrested for corporate corruption. It seemed her unethical behaviors were not limited to her personal life but had permeated her professional dealings as well. While part of me felt vindicated that Claire was facing justice, another part of me was saddened by the sheer waste of her potential, and the destruction of the person I once considered a close friend. As for my life, it has taken a turn toward rebuilding and refocusing on the future. The divorce, though painful, allowed me to start anew, focusing solely on raising Ethan and ensuring that Lucas, though he lived with James, remained a central part of our lives. The challenge, however, has been dealing with the emotional and psychological impact on Ethan. The absence of his father in our daily life has been a significant adjustment for him. James tries to be present, coming by to visit and taking Ethan out on weekends. But the once seamless nature of our family life is now a patchwork of scheduled visits and shared custody. Ethan, only 5 years old, struggles with this new reality. He often asks when Daddy is coming home, and on days when he realizes that the home he knew is no more, his confusion turns into quiet sorrow. Seeing my son grapple with these feelings has been heart-wrenching. Despite the anger and betrayal I felt towards James, I've encouraged a healthy relationship between him and Ethan, believing that whatever issues we had as spouses should not taint their father-son bond. We both agreed to attend family therapy to help Ethan adjust to the changes, and while it has been helpful, the road is undoubtedly long and filled with uncertainties. In this new chapter of our lives, I've had to be both mother and father in many ways, trying to fill the gaps left by James's absence. I've also had to navigate my own healing process, dealing with the lingering feelings of betrayal and the task of forgiving enough to move forward, if not for myself, then for the sake of Ethan. As I focus on rebuilding our lives, my resolve strengthens. I have found solace in returning to work, in strengthening bonds with family and friends who have shown unwavering support through these tumultuous times. The community around us has been a steady source of comfort and stability, and I'm grateful for every gesture of kindness and understanding they have extended towards us. Despite the scars left by the events of the past months, I am hopeful. Life, though unpredictable and often painful, also brings opportunities for growth and new beginnings. For Ethan, for Lucas, and for myself, I am committed to building a future defined not by the failures and betrayals of the past, but by the possibilities of what is yet to come. As we move forward, one day at a time, I hold on to the hope that with love, resilience, and a bit of courage, we can find peace and happiness again. My husband is in love with his student. I have no idea what to do. My name is Emily, and from the outside, our lives probably looked like a neatly laid out sequence of ideal milestones. But sometimes, what you see on the surface doesn't quite tell the whole story underneath. My husband, Michael, and I met during our sophomore year at the University of Michigan. We were both pursuing degrees that promised intense careers, mine in architectural design and his in medicine. Our paths crossed in an elective class, History of Modern Europe, a subject far removed from our major fields, perhaps explaining why we noticed each other among the crowd of future doctors and architects. Our meeting was as mundane as it was fateful. A spilled coffee, a stack of medical textbooks teetering precariously. I reached out to help, and our stories entwined from that moment. He apologized for the mess, his voice calm, a stark contrast to the frantic rush of the cafeteria. We talked briefly about our courses, laughed at the serendipity of our majors colliding, and exchanged numbers. That brief encounter grew into long nights spent discussing everything from Renaissance literature to the intricacies of human anatomy. In him, I found a listening ear and a thoughtful heart. In me, he found a burst of creativity and warmth. From the start, Michael was the kind of man who drew people in effortlessly. His charisma wasn't the flashy kind that fades after a few encounters. It was a gentle, enduring magnetism coupled with a brilliant mind that fascinated me endlessly. I remember how during our study sessions, he'd relate historical events to human behaviors with such passion, that even the driest facts seemed to breathe and live. We fell in love among books and coffee spills, our conversations stretching late into the night, often closing the library down. By the time we graduated, there was no question that we would marry. We were married 2 years after my graduation in a small, intimate ceremony surrounded by family and friends. It was simple, beautiful, just like we wanted. Our lives together felt like a constant adventure, from our small apartment filled with mismatched furniture to our discussions about future dreams and aspirations. Fast forward 8 years, we were celebrating our daughter, Sophie's, birthday. Born in the early uncertain days of 2020, she was a light in a time of global upheaval. Michael had by then become a respected professor at a medical school, adored by his students for the same reasons he had once captivated me. His career had flourished in the ways we had imagined, and he carried his responsibilities with an admirable balance of seriousness and empathy. Michael's career as a professor at the local med school was a source of pride for us both. He loved teaching, loved the spark in his students' eyes when complex concepts finally made sense. I watched him over the years, growing into a role that seemed tailor-made for him, mentor, educator, and occasionally, friend to his students. He was a doctor himself, a fact that filled our conversations with fascinating, if sometimes gruesome, stories from the hospital. His dedication was as clear as the exhaustion that would sometimes shadow his features after a long day. For my part, I had put a pause on my own career to focus on raising Sophie, a decision that felt right despite the shadow it cast on my professional ambitions. It was a life that I never really questioned. The normalcy of it was comforting in its own way. My days revolved around playdates and parent-teacher meetings, interspersed with freelance design projects when time allowed. Michael and we were a team, or so I believed, navigating the challenges of parenthood and professional life with a kind of synchronized rhythm that most of our friends envied. Sarah, a fellow academic in Michael's department, had become one of my closest friends through these years. Our friendship was one of those fortunate relationships that extended beyond mere convenience and entered the realm of genuine affection and respect. Sarah had been there through every major milestone, my pregnancy, Sophie's birth, and every minor crisis in between. She was vibrant, outspoken, and fiercely intelligent. Our friendship had started on mutual professional respect and a shared love of old jazz music. She knew Michael as well as anyone could in the professional maze of academia. Their friendship, rooted in years of collaboration, seemed just another part of the normalcy of our lives. She was a constant in our lives, trusted implicitly by both Michael and me. Sarah had always been straightforward, which made her recent behavior all the more puzzling to me. In the weeks leading up to that unsettling lunch, I had begun to notice subtle changes in the way she spoke about Michael. It started with offhand comments that seemed to hover on the edge of caution, suggesting I keep a closer eye on him, not just as a husband but in his professional sphere. Each time such a suggestion surfaced, she would quickly steer the conversation towards less delicate topics, like department politics or upcoming college events. "Just watch how he is," Sarah would murmur as we watched Michael interacting with colleagues at a faculty gathering. Then, seeing my furrowed brow, she'd laugh and wave off her previous comment. "I mean, look at how he manages to charm everyone. You snagged quite the catch." It was disconcerting, this pattern of hinting at something amiss and then retreating into platitudes about Michael's charm and professional dedication. My trust in Michael was unwavering. He was not just my husband but also the father of my child, a man who had always upheld the highest standards of integrity and affection in our marriage. How could I suspect him of untoward behavior? Michael was deeply involved in his role as a professor. He had always taken his responsibilities seriously, providing guidance and support to his students while maintaining professional boundaries. His love for us was evident, his commitment unwavering. So, when Sarah insinuated there was something I should be wary of, it felt like a betrayal of the trust I had in him. Each time Sarah made these cryptic comments, I observed Michael more closely, looking for any sign that might justify her insinuations. Yet nothing seemed out of place. His interactions with colleagues and students were as they had always been, respectful and professional. At home, he was the attentive husband and loving father, often talking about his students with pride but never crossing the line into inappropriate fondness or familiarity. But Sarah's behavior grew increasingly odd. At times, she appeared distracted, her gaze lingering on Michael a little too long during social events, her comments more pointed, tinged with an urgency I couldn't understand. "Emily, you know people sometimes change, right? Situations at work can get complicated," she said one evening as we cleaned up after a dinner party. Her tone was serious, lacking its usual lightness. "Sarah, are you okay? You've been a bit off lately," I replied, concerned for my friend who now seemed to carry a burden she was hesitant to share. She paused, a frown creasing her forehead. "It's nothing really, just work stress, I suppose. But you know, it's always good to keep an eye out for everything." Her ambiguity frustrated me. What was she hinting at? If there was a genuine concern, why wouldn't she just say it outright? Sarah's behavior continued to gnaw at me, a constant reminder that something wasn't quite right. Yet, every time I looked at Michael, every time we shared a laugh or a quiet evening together, Sarah's insinuations seemed ridiculous, almost offensive. How could I doubt the man who had been by my side through every significant moment of our lives together? As the weeks passed, I tried to dismiss the unease that Sarah's words had instilled in me. I focused on our family, on the upcoming holidays, on the simple joys of our daily routine. Michael was as present and engaged as ever, his demeanor at home not reflecting any of the concerns Sarah had subtly tried to plant in my mind. Then came the lunch in December, a turning point that forced me to confront the nagging doubt Sarah's strange behavior had sown. We met at a small cafe, a neutral space away from the familiar settings of work or home. Sarah seemed particularly tense that day, her usual vibrant self shadowed by a seriousness that immediately put me on edge. We ordered our food, and for a few moments, we engaged in the usual pleasantries. But as the waiter walked away, Sarah's demeanor shifted. She looked around, ensuring no familiar faces were within earshot, and then turned to me with a solemnity that instantly chilled the air between us. "Emily, I've been beating around the bush for too long, and I'm sorry for that. I need to tell you something important about Michael," she began, her voice low and steady. "It's about him and a student." I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. The vague hints, the changed behavior, all led to this moment. Despite my deepest fears, I had believed in my husband's fidelity, in the sanctity of our life together. Sarah's next words would challenge everything I thought I knew, forcing me to see beyond the facade of normalcy that I had clung to so desperately. What she disclosed next wasn't just a revelation. It was a shattering of the trust and reality I had built my life around. Then, out of the blue, she voiced a suspicion that had apparently been troubling her for some time. Something, she suggested, might be going on between Michael and a med student. Specifically, a bright young woman who was not just any student, but one who seemed to look at Michael not just as a mentor but perhaps something more. The idea seemed ludicrous. Michael had always maintained a professional distance that bordered on aloofness, his interactions with students uniformly marked by respect and propriety. I laughed it off at first. It seemed so out of character for the man I knew, the man I had spent nearly a decade of my life with, who had always seemed as devoted to me and our daughter as he was on the day we set our vows. But as Sarah described what she called yearning looks, exchanged in moments caught in the corners of classrooms and hallways, my laughter began to sound hollow, even to my own ears. What was I missing? Was the routine that I cherished merely a veneer, hiding a fissure I was too afraid to acknowledge? Despite my initial dismissal, Sarah's words planted a seed of doubt, one that, unbeknownst to me, was about to sprout into a confrontation that would challenge everything I thought I knew about our seemingly perfect life. Finally, she set down her fork, took a deep breath, and said, "There's something I've been meaning to talk to you about, and I'm not really sure how to say it." Her voice was serious, and I felt a twinge of anxiety at the gravity of her tone. This was not our usual gossip or chatting about departmental politics. Something was off. "Is everything okay?" I asked, trying to mask my concern with a sip of my tea. "It's about Michael," she began, and my heart skipped a beat. "I've noticed something off at work." She paused, searching for the right words. "It's about how he's been with one of the med students." I felt a defensive wall immediately go up. Michael had always been professional, a model professor, and the suggestion that there might be something inappropriate was jarring. "Sarah, what are you talking about?" My voice came out a bit sharper than I intended. She flinched slightly, which only made my stomach tighten more. "I've seen them together, and it's just the way they look at each other. I've known Michael for years, right? He's never looked at anyone else like that." "Not even close," she continued, her eyes now meeting mine with a mixture of concern and apology. "Looks? Sarah, you're basing this on looks?" I couldn't hide my incredulity. The idea seemed absurd, plucked from thin air or perhaps some daytime drama. It was unlike Sarah to make such vague accusations. "Yes, I know it sounds crazy," she admitted, rubbing her temples. "I wouldn't have said anything if it wasn't so obvious. It's like watching a slow burn romance movie. He looks at her the way he used to look at you." The words stung, more than I expected. A vivid image of James's tender gazes in our early days flashed through my mind, his eyes filled with unspoken words and promises. It was painful to think of those looks directed at someone else, let alone a student. "I'm sure you're overthinking it," I said, forcing a laugh that sounded hollow even to my own ears. "Michael is devoted to his work and to us. He wouldn't jeopardize that. It's probably just professional admiration or something. You know how passionate he is about mentoring." Sarah nodded, looking relieved that I wasn't upset but still unconvinced. "Maybe. But just watch them, okay? I hope I'm wrong. I really do." The rest of our lunch passed in a blur. I kept replaying Sarah's words in my mind, each repetition chipping away at my initial disbelief. By the time we parted ways, a seed of doubt had been firmly planted, despite my efforts to dismiss it. That evening, as Michael came home and wrapped me in a warm familiar embrace, I tried to see any hint of what Sarah had mentioned. He was the same as he had always been with me, caring, loving, asking about my day with genuine interest. But now, a filter of suspicion tinted my perception, coloring his every action, every smile. Later, as we settled down after dinner, I brought it up casually. "Sarah and I had lunch today," I mentioned, watching his face for any sign of change. "Oh," he responded, looking up from a book. "How is she?" Good. She mentioned something funny though." I forced a chuckle, trying to keep the mood light. "She thinks you have a crush on one of your students." He laughed, to dismiss it as ridiculous. Despite Michael's denials and his sudden criticism of Sarah, something inside me refused to settle. His words, intended to cast doubt on Sarah's integrity and divert attention from himself, only fueled my determination to unearth the truth. How could he suddenly turn on Sarah, a friend who had been nothing but supportive to us both? His accusations seemed like desperate attempts to protect himself, and the discrepancy between his words and his actions left a bitter taste in my mouth. On the surface, I maintained a composed façade. I laughed at the right moments, nodded along to his explanations, and pretended to consider his perspective. But beneath that calm exterior, my mind was racing, piecing together every odd remark, every late night at the office, every unexplained absence that had seemed insignificant at the time but now loomed large with suspicion. I knew I needed more than just my instincts and Michael's word against Sarah's. I needed concrete evidence, something undeniable. I began by checking our phone records, something I had never felt the need to do before in our marriage. It felt like a betrayal on my part, an invasion of the trust we had built over the years, but these were desperate times. The phone records showed nothing unusual at first glance, calls to colleagues, his secretary, his brother. But then I noticed a number that recurred more frequently than others, at odd hours, sometimes late into the night. It was a number I didn't recognize. My heart sank as I scribbled it down, a sense of betrayal washing over me anew. Next I turned on our computer at home. Michael was meticulous about logging out of his accounts, but he'd become complacent, perhaps too confident in his ability to cover his tracks. I found his email open, a thread highlighted, And as I clicked on it, I braced myself for what I might find. The emails were careful, guarded, but the underlying tone was unmistakable. They were more than professors and students exchanging academic pleasantries. There was a personal touch, a warmth that should not have been there. Armed with this information, I still felt hollow. Confirmation of Michael's deceit didn't bring the satisfaction I'd hoped for. It only amplified the pain. With every piece of evidence, our marriage felt more like a lie, and the man I thought I knew slipped further away. However, I decided not to face him. Over the next few days, my interactions with Michael remained superficially normal. We spoke about mundane things, Sophie's schedule, grocery lists, the trivialities of daily life that didn't touch the raw nerve of our fractured relationship. Inside, my world was in chaos, but I kept a calm exterior. He was none the wiser, believing perhaps that we were slowly bridging the gap between us, while in truth, I was meticulously planning my next steps and gathering more evidence. The weekend was approaching, and I had already laid my plans. The Nursing Mothers Association, a group I joined after Sophie's birth, had organized a camping trip. It was the perfect alibi to leave home for an extended period without arousing suspicion. I informed Michael only a couple of days beforehand, asserting that it would be a good bonding experience for Sophie and me and a refreshing break for myself. He responded with enthusiasm, overly so, which now seemed another red flag in his recent behavior. "Have a great time," he said, smiling. "You both deserve this break. Don't worry about anything here." His ready agreement to our absence gave me the window I needed. I'd arranged for a neighbor, ostensibly to check on our house in my absence, but in reality, to observe Michael's movements when he thought he was unwatched. This neighbor, Jenna, was a trusted friend who was aware of my situation and willing to help. The camping trip itself was a much-needed distraction. Being around other women, sharing stories and laughter, allowed me to breathe a little easier, even if just for a day. Sophie loved the outdoors, her laughter mingling with the breeze, her joy at the simple things, a butterfly, the crackle of a campfire, helping to lift the weight from my chest. Meanwhile, Jenna texted me updates. Michael had left the house mid-morning and didn't return until late in the afternoon. She couldn't see where he went but noted the time for later reference. When he returned, he brought someone with him. My heart sank reading her message. The visitor was female, young, and they seemed comfortable with each other. Too comfortable. Jenna couldn't get close enough to hear conversations without risking being seen but managed to snap a few photos from her upstairs window. Returning home late Sunday, I felt a mix of dread and anger. The atmosphere in the house was too calm, Michael too casual. He asked about the camping, his curiosity feigning innocence. I shared anecdotes of our outing, all the while feeling a nauseating mix of betrayal and resolve churning inside me. The next day, after Michael left for work and Sophie was at her daycare, I met with Jenna to collect the photos. The images were grainy, but the intimacy was unmistakable. Their proximity, their body language, and the ease between them. It was more than enough to confirm my suspicions. Armed with this new evidence, I knew I had to confront Michael. But first, I needed more concrete proof, something undeniable that would prevent him from weaving more lies. I contacted a private investigator, recommended by a lawyer friend. Discretion was key, and the investigator assured me he could discreetly track Michael's movements and interactions over the next few weeks. As the investigation unfolded, I maintained a veneer of normalcy at home. Michael seemed oblivious to the undercurrents, perhaps blinded by his own duplicity, or convinced of his ability to conceal his affair. But the strain of living a double life, playing the part of the dutiful wife while secretly orchestrating an investigation into my husband's infidelity, was exhausting. Finally, the investigator provided me with a report. It included times, places, even audio recordings of conversations between Michael and the student. The evidence was damning, irrefutable. They spoke of their feelings for each other, their plans to keep their relationship secret until the timing was right, whatever that meant. With the proof in hand, I felt a cold resolve settle over me. This was not just a fleeting mistake on Michael's part, but a deliberate, ongoing betrayal. I decided it was time to confront him, not just as his wife, but as someone who deserved the truth. The confrontation was planned for an evening when Sophie was staying over at a friend's house. I didn't want her to witness the potential fallout. When Michael came home, I was sitting in the living room, the pile of evidence laid out on the coffee table in front of me. He sensed something was off the moment he walked in. His smile faltered as he saw the papers and photos spread out, his eyes widening as he took in their implications. "Emily, what is this?" His voice was shaky, the usual confidence gone. "It's over, Michael," I said quietly, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. "I know everything. There's no point in denying it any longer." He sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. The next few hours were a blur of accusations, tears, and confessions. Michael pleaded for forgiveness, promising to end the affair and do whatever it took to repair our marriage. But something inside me had broken beyond repair. The trust was shattered, and no amount of remorse could rebuild it. I asked him to leave, to give me space to think about the future. He left, defeated, carrying a small suitcase with his belongings. The house felt empty, the silence a stark contrast to the chaos of emotions that had filled it just hours before. In the days that followed, I consulted with my lawyer to discuss the next steps. Divorce seemed the inevitable conclusion, not out of spite but necessity. I needed to rebuild, to create a stable, honest life for Sophie and myself. As I navigated the complexities of separation and legal proceedings, I also reached out to a therapist to begin working through the emotional fallout of the betrayal. It was a long road ahead, but for the first time in months, I felt a sense of agency over my own life. Looking back, I couldn't help but feel a profound sense of loss. For the marriage I thought I had, for the partner I believed Michael to be. But there was also a growing sense of resilience, a knowledge that I could face whatever came next. For Sophie, for myself, I would build a new life. One rooted in honesty and strength. The journey was just beginning, but I was ready to face it head on. Am I the A for not telling my husband's friend that his boss is my uncle? My name is Emily, and if you were to ask me what defines my late 20s, I'd probably say it's a blend of tech, friendships, and more recently, a touch of unintended secrecy that has stirred more drama than I ever anticipated. I'm 29, comfortably settled, or so I thought, with Liam, my husband of 3 years who is not just my life partner but also my best friend. He's 30, a tech enthusiast with a knack for solving complex coding problems which seems just about as complicated as our social circle sometimes. Our lives are somewhat centered around Liam's job at a well-known tech company where he works alongside some of his closest friends, or our friends I should correct, as I've come to know and cherish them over the countless dinners, movie nights, and candid porch conversations at our home. Among these friends are Kurt, Veronica, and Rachel, each a character so vibrant, they might as well be considered part of our extended family. Kurt is the outspoken one, never shying away from a debate, always ready with tech gossip and stock tips. Veronica, with her sharp wit and a passion for environmental causes, often steers our conversations to the latest sustainability trends. Then there's Rachel, the quieter one, whose observations are often punctuated with insights that only someone as observant as her could offer. Our gatherings, though regular, had developed a rhythm and comfort that made each of them both anticipated and cherished. The ease with which we could slip into discussions, sprawling from the mundane to the intense, lent a richness to our relationships that I had come to deeply value. It was during these get-togethers that the fusion of personal and professional worlds would often bring to light the varied experiences of our little group. Our house, a cozy 2-story just outside the city's hustle, has become something of a hub for these gatherings. Here, under the soft glow of string lights in our backyard or sprawled across the mismatched cushions of our living room, discussions often veer into work territory. It's during these moments, amidst the clinking of glasses and the occasional laughter, that I've learned more about the dynamics of their workplace than any corporate newsletter could provide. One late summer evening stood out particularly when Kurt and Veronica, after a particularly grueling week at work, had a lot to unload. We were in our backyard, a space that, with its simple patio furniture and a fire pit, invited open conversations under the stars. The mood was lighter at first as we shared laughs and updates about our lives, but as the night grew deeper and our glasses were refilled, the tone inevitably shifted towards the stresses of their jobs. Kurt, his brow furrowed and a serious look replacing his usual jovial demeanor, started venting about a recent project. He described how every aspect of his proposal was scrutinized and eventually dismissed by his boss, my uncle, though he was unaware of the connection. "It's like walking on eggshells," he complained. "You spend weeks preparing something, only for it to be shot down without much consideration. It's exhausting." Veronica chimed in, nodding vigorously as she recounted her own frustrations. "It's not just about the projects, it's his whole management style. Everything needs his stamp of approval, and it bottlenecks everything." She sipped her wine, a look of exasperation crossing her face. "Sometimes I wonder if he really understands the kind of pressure we're under." I listened, a knot forming in my stomach. Part of me wanted to jump to my uncle's defense, or at least explain some of his actions from the personal anecdotes I knew so well, how his stringent standards came from a place of deep commitment to excellence, how he often worked late into the night worried about the company's future. But I held back, acutely aware of the boundaries I had set for myself not to mix family knowledge with these discussions. As the night wore on, the conversation shifted to lighter topics, but the residue of their discontent lingered in the air. It was a scenario that repeated itself with slight variations over several gatherings. Each time, I felt a tug of war inside me, questioning whether my silence was indeed the right choice. The answer seemed to lean towards yes, particularly after a particularly heated discussion one crisp fall evening. The air was sharp with the scent of burning leaves, a gentle reminder of the changing seasons, as our group huddled around the glow of the fire pit, the warmth a stark contrast to the chill of the air. Kurt had arrived with visible frustration etching his features, his usual greeting muted by the weight of his grievances. "He's done it again," Kurt blurted out almost immediately after settling down. Denied my request for a flex schedule, said it wasn't viable despite half the team already on similar setups. "It's like he's got a personal vendetta against me." His words hung heavily between us. I could see the hurt and confusion in his eyes, emotions fueled by what he perceived as unfair treatment. The group fell into a sympathetic silence, each of us processing Kurt's distress in our own way. It was Veronica who broke the silence, her voice soft but firm. "You know, maybe it's time you considered talking to HR about this. It sounds more than just strict, it sounds personal." I felt my heart skip a beat. The situation was escalating in a way I hadn't anticipated. The suggestion of HR involvement was a significant step, one that could have real implications for my uncle's career and reputation. I wrestled internally with my loyalties, torn between my family ties and my friendships, each demanding allegiance in ways that seemed increasingly incompatible. That night, after everyone had left and the last dishes were put away, I found myself sitting alone in the quiet of the kitchen. The gentle hum of the refrigerator and the distant sounds of night did little to soothe the turmoil inside me. It was clear that what had started as mere workplace gripes was morphing into something potentially damaging, and my role in all this, however indirect, weighed heavily on me. I pondered over countless scenarios, revealing my connection to my uncle and explaining his side of the story, defending him outright, or continuing to maintain my silence. Each option seemed fraught with complications and potential fallout. The simplicity of our friendly gatherings had been overshadowed by an undercurrent of real conflict, and I was in the middle, whether I liked it or not. I will tell you a little more about my uncle. Uncle Thomas, or as he's known in corporate circles, Mr. Thompson, has been with the company for over 10 years. He holds a very senior position, and his decisions impact many people, including indirectly, our little social circle. To Liam and me, he's just Uncle Thomas. He has been a part of my life for as long as I can remember, through holidays, family barbecues, and as an emergency contact on school forms. Our bond goes beyond familial obligation. He was there when my parents were too busy, always ensuring I had everything I needed, and pushing me to pursue my ambitions, no matter how outlandish they seemed. For Liam and me, our relationship with Uncle Thomas has always been more personal than professional. He's been to our home, knows our favorite wines, and even helped us set up the backyard garden. But to Kurt and Veronica, he's the stern boss, the one who doesn't quite understand the nuances of modern workplace flexibility, like working from home, which he apparently grants sparingly and, seemingly, unfairly. Liam and I have often deliberated whether to disclose this connection. It's not like it's a secret per se, but it's never really come up, and honestly, we've never seen a reason to complicate things by mixing family and work any more than necessary. After all, Uncle Thomas is just another relative to us, not a character from their office dramas. But as I've come to learn, omissions, even innocent ones, can have consequences just as tangible as outright lies. As I sat there, the real question emerged not just about what I should do, but what kind of friend, niece and person I wanted to be. Was honesty always the best policy, even if it risked hurting those you care about? Or was there value in preserving peace, even if it meant keeping parts of your life hidden? The answers weren't clear, and as the night deepened, so did my sense of uncertainty. The only thing I knew for sure was that something would have to change. The routine of scrolling through old photos on a lazy Sunday afternoon seemed harmless, almost nostalgic. As I sifted through digital folders filled with memories, I found a family photo from a large gathering a few years back. There, in the midst of laughing faces and casual embraces, stood Uncle Thomas, younger but unmistakably stern, even in the joyous chaos of a family reunion. Without much thought, driven by a surge of fondness for that day, I uploaded the photo to Instagram, captioning it with a simple heart emoji and a throwback hashtag. Little did I know, this innocent act was about to ignite a storm. Rachel, whom I'd added on Instagram during one of our many gatherings, rarely interacted with my posts. It hadn't even crossed my mind that she might connect the dots from the photo to her workplace. But of course she did. The fallout was swift. Rachel, ever the observer, recognized Uncle Thomas immediately, not as my beloved uncle but as her boss's boss, a figure both pivotal and polarizing in her work life. By Monday morning, The news had traveled through the small intertwined social and professional circles that Kurt too had seen the photo. His reaction was far more visceral than Rachel's quiet acknowledgement. Kurt felt betrayed, deceived even. And I remained oblivious to the unfolding drama until Liam came home that evening, his face clouded with concern. He confronted me today at work, Liam began, his voice tinged with exhaustion. He recounted how Kurt had stormed up to him during their lunch break, his usual easygoing nature replaced by a mix of anger and hurt. "How could you guys not tell me that your uncle is Mr. Thompson?" Kurt had demanded, his voice strained, a stark contrast to his typically jovial demeanor. Liam, caught off guard and sandwiched between his loyalty to me and his friendship with Kurt, had struggled to respond. We didn't think it was necessary. Emily and we never talk about work stuff at home with Uncle Thomas. But you knew how much I was struggling with him at work, Kurt had shot back, his frustration palpable. The conversation had ended abruptly, with Kurt walking away, leaving Liam standing amidst the buzz of the cafeteria, feeling both accused and helpless. The emotional toll on Liam was evident as he relayed the encounter. I watched him wrestle with feelings of guilt and frustration, guilt for keeping a part of our lives so private, and frustration for being thrust into an uncomfortable confrontation. As for me, the shock of the situation was overwhelming. I had never intended to create such a rift. The photo was just a piece of my personal history, shared without malice or forethought. Yet, here I was, at the center of a conflict that questioned my integrity and transparency. I struggled with a mixture of emotions, surprise at the unexpected connections made from a simple social media post, guilt for the inadvertent pain it caused my friends, and confusion about whether I had an obligation to disclose my family ties in the first place. That night, as Liam and I sat in our kitchen, a silence hung between us. It was a rare discord in our usually harmonious life. I mulled over the words and the hurt in Liam's recounting of his confrontation with Kurt. It pained me to see him so distressed, a direct consequence of my actions, however unintentional. "I just wish I had thought to mention it at some point," I murmured, the words heavy with regret. "Maybe this could have been avoided." Liam reached across the table, his hand covering mine. "It's not your fault, Em. How could you have known Kurt would react like this? We've always kept work and family separate." Yet, as reasonable as Liam's words were, I couldn't shake off the feeling of culpability. The boundaries I had so carefully maintained between my personal and professional life had blurred, and the fallout was messy. The revelation had not just strained Kurt's perception of our friendship, but it also put Liam in an awkward position at work, straddling the line between professional obligations and personal loyalties. In the quiet of our home, I reflected on the broader implications of my decision to keep certain aspects of my life private. Was I wrong not to disclose my relationship with Uncle Thomas, knowing well that he was a significant figure in my friends' work lives? The ethical dilemma was complex, more so because the omission was not out of malice but rather a natural compartmentalization of my life's different aspects. The days following the revelation and the subsequent confrontation felt thick with tension, both at home and, as Liam relayed to me, at his workplace. Kurt's interaction with Liam had not just altered their friendship, it rippled through their professional interactions as well, creating an atmosphere fraught with unspoken grievances and unresolved conflicts. Sitting across from Liam at our dining room table, a space that had witnessed countless light-hearted dinners and now hosted our somber discussions, I could feel the strain of recent events weighing on us both. Liam had always been supportive, understanding my reasons for keeping personal details private, but even he couldn't hide his discomfort at the current situation. "Do you think I was wrong?" I asked him one evening, my voice barely above a whisper. "Wrong for not telling Kurt about Uncle Thomas?" Liam considered this for a moment, his brow furrowed in thought. "I don't think it's about right or wrong, Em, it's more about perceptions. Kurt felt blindsided because it's his boss we're talking about. It's personal to him, and affects his daily life. Maybe we could have been more upfront, but honestly, I never thought it would come to this either." His words echoed my internal turmoil. Had my discretion been ethically misguided? Was the privacy I valued so much actually a facade that concealed more crucial truths that deserved to be shared? The boundaries I had maintained between my personal life and the professional lives of our friends had served to protect my peace, but at what cost to their trust? The change in office dynamics for Kurt was palpable. According to Liam, Kurt had become more withdrawn at work, less engaged in team activities, and his usual lively banter had diminished significantly. This shift was not just a reaction to feeling betrayed by friends, but also a reflection of his increased wariness around leadership. Around my uncle, whom he could no longer see just as a boss but as a family member of his friends. At home and within our friend circle, the ramifications were just as profound but more painful because they were steeped in personal connections that had been nurtured over years. Rachel and Veronica, caught between their loyalty to Kurt and their friendship with us, were understandably more reserved. Our gatherings, once filled with laughter and ease, now settled into more cautious, measured interactions. The trust that had once defined our relationships was now under scrutiny, and each conversation felt like a step on a tightrope, balancing openness with the fear of further misunderstandings. In these moments of quiet reflection, I weighed the benefits of keeping personal and professional lives separate against the trust issues that had emerged. This compartmentalization had seemed essential, a way to maintain clarity and focus in different areas of my life. Yet I couldn't ignore the isolation it had inadvertently fostered, leaving my friends feeling deceived and me feeling like I had inadvertently misled them. I thought about all the times Kurt and Veronica had openly discussed their work frustrations, not just as colleagues venting but as friends seeking comfort and support. By withholding information about my uncle, had I denied them the full context they needed for those conversations? Had my silence compromised the support I could offer them? These questions haunted me, challenging my beliefs about privacy and transparency. The need for a resolution became clear, not just to mend friendships but to realign my own ethical compass, which seemed to have been thrown off by these unforeseen events. As Liam and I continued to navigate this challenging time, our discussions often returned to the importance of honesty and openness in all our relationships. We resolved to be more communicative, not just with each other but with our friends. We recognized that while the separation of personal and professional spheres is sometimes necessary, the bridges between them must be handled with care, honesty, and respect for the emotional and practical realities of the people involved. As the weight of the unresolved tensions began to overshadow the warmth of our previous interactions, Liam and I decided that it was imperative to address the situation head-on. We agreed that open communication and a sincere attempt at reconciliation were crucial, even if the outcome remained uncertain. Thus, we extended an invitation to Kurt and Veronica to come over for dinner, hoping that a familiar, comfortable setting might foster the openness needed for a genuine conversation. On the evening they arrived, the atmosphere was thick with apprehension. Liam and I had prepared a simple meal, thinking comfort food might ease the initial awkwardness. As they stepped through the door, their polite smiles didn't quite reach their eyes, but their acceptance of the invitation was a hopeful sign that they, too, were willing to mend fences. Once we settled around the dining table, the small talk slowly dissipated, and a heavy silence settled. It was Liam who broke the ice. "We really appreciate you both coming tonight," he began, his voice steady but softer than usual. "We know things have been awkward, and we really value our friendship too much to let it falter without trying to make things right." I took a deep breath before continuing where Liam left off. "We owe you an apology for not being upfront about my uncle. It was never our intention to create a situation where anyone felt deceived. I genuinely didn't think it was necessary to bring it up, and I see now how that might have affected your trust in us." Kurt shifted in his seat, his expression still guarded but attentive. "I appreciate you saying that, Emily. It's just been a lot to process, knowing I've been venting about my boss in front of his niece. It made me feel foolish, and a bit betrayed." Veronica added, her voice calm but firm. "It's not just about feeling betrayed, though that's certainly a part of it. It's also about feeling like we're not on equal footing. If there's important information that affects how we interact, it feels only fair that everyone knows." Their words stung because they resonated with truth. The imbalance of information had inadvertently put Kurt and Veronica in a vulnerable position, one that I had not adequately considered. "You're right," I acknowledged, feeling the gravity of my oversight. "It was a lapse in judgment on my part. Please believe me when I say that nothing shared in confidence has ever, or will ever, be mentioned to my uncle. Our home has always been a safe space, and I failed to protect that." Liam nodded, supporting the commitment to regain their trust. "Going forward, we want to be more transparent with you both. We all share a lot in our lives, and it's only fair that we manage these overlaps with more openness." The conversation gradually shifted from the personal grievances to how we could ensure a healthier dynamic in the future. Kurt seemed to relax slightly, his posture easing as the evening wore on. "I guess it's also a lesson for me," he conceded. "I've been pretty open about my frustrations at work, maybe too open without considering who might be connected to whom. It's something I need to think about more." Veronica, who had been listening intently, finally smiled, a hint of the old warmth returning. "And maybe we all need a reminder that our work grievances shouldn't define our personal relationships. We've all been under a lot of stress, and it's easy to let that spill over." As the evening concluded, the air between us felt clearer, though remnants of the tension undoubtedly lingered. We agreed to meet more regularly, to keep the lines of communication open and to support each other not just as friends but also as individuals navigating the complex web of professional and personal lives intertwined. Reflecting on the evening after they had left, Liam and I discussed how delicate the balance of privacy and transparency is. The episode had exposed vulnerabilities in our relationships but also opened up opportunities for deeper understanding and mutual respect. We recognized that trust, once shaken, requires time and consistent effort to rebuild. In the quiet moments that followed, as we cleaned up the remnants of our reconciliatory dinner, I pondered the broader implications of our experiences. The themes of privacy, trust, and workplace dynamics that had come up tonight were not unique to us but were universal in nature, affecting countless friendships and professional relationships. How we navigate these issues, I realized, defines not just the integrity of our relationships but also our personal integrity. As we turned off the lights and headed to bed, I felt a cautious optimism. While the path to full recovery in our friendships might still be long and occasionally challenging, initiating this open dialogue was a crucial first step. The commitment to transparency and mutual respect we had reaffirmed tonight promised a foundation strong enough to withstand the complexities of our intertwined lives. Growing up in the LGBT community, I endured an unhappy childhood marred by mistreatment and harsh criticism from my older brother. When he became seriously ill, I made the difficult decision to leave him. I'm Danny, now 34, and my deep-seated anguish stems mainly from two sources: my parents and my older brother Alex, who is now 38. Our parents, a nurse named Janet and an electrician named Mark, were ordinary in every way except one: their blatant favoritism towards Alex. This favoritism painted the canvas of our childhood with unequal strokes, favoring him with brighter, more vibrant colors while leaving my portion dim and faded. Growing up in the modest town of Elmswood, where everyone knew everyone else's business, didn't help. Our small close-knit community often amplified the discrepancies between Alex and me, as if under a magnifying glass. At school events, neighborhood gatherings, and even in the grocery store, I was Alex's brother, a shadow trailing behind the more illustrious elder sibling. From the earliest days I can recall, Alex was the golden child. Birthdays, which should have been a celebration of life, were the first battlegrounds of favoritism. On my 10th birthday, which fell on a chilly but cheerful October day, I was excited about the party planned at our house. Yet, even this day was co-opted by Alex, as our parents had let him decide the theme. He chose superheroes, knowing full well I preferred dinosaurs. He smirked as he paraded around in a Superman cape, while I sulked in a corner, my T-Rex costume feeling suddenly out of place and childish. Christmas was no different. Each year Alex would be the first to dive under the tree, his hands tearing through wrapping paper on gifts that often turned out to be the latest gadgets or toys, things he wanted. My gifts were often practical: clothes, books, or worse, items clearly meant for older kids, which Alex would end up claiming anyway. The injustice of it was like a stone in my shoe, constant and irksome. Our parents seemed blind to the imbalance, or perhaps they chose to be. They praised Alex's every achievement, no matter how minor, and offered excuses for his failures. In contrast, my achievements were met with nods or polite smiles, and my failures were proof of laziness or lack of talent. This disparity extended beyond gifts and celebrations. At dinner, Alex would talk about his day, his plans, his friends, and our parents absorbed every word with eager attention. When it was my turn, their eyes would glaze over, as if they were waiting for a commercial break to end, and the main program to resume. This pattern of neglect had a profound effect on me. It ingrained in me a sense of unworthiness and a conviction that I was inherently less lovable than my brother. These feelings were compounded by the whispers of pity or the comparisons drawn by neighbors and family friends, always noting how different Alex and I were, and not in my favor. As we grew older, the chasm widened. High school brought new challenges, bullying being one of them. I was an easy target, not just for my peers but, it seemed, for fate itself. Alex, ever the charmer, was popular and athletic. He excelled in sports and had a wide circle of friends. I, on the other hand, was bookish and introverted, often bullied for my quiet nature and the hand-me-downs I wore, many of which had started off as Alex's. One particularly painful memory was during our shared high school years when I was 15 and Alex 19. It was the day of the school's annual talent show, an event I had been eagerly anticipating because I was to perform a piano piece I had spent months perfecting. I remember walking onto the stage, the nerves dancing in my stomach, only to see Alex in the front row, surrounded by his friends, sneering up at me. Mid-performance, a loud obnoxious heckle from his direction broke my concentration. I faltered, my fingers tripping over keys in a discordant tumble. The audience's laughter stung worse than any physical blow. After the show my parents comforted Alex, who feigned innocence and claimed his friends were the culprits. My humiliation, it seemed, was of no consequence. This dynamic persisted into our adulthood. I watched as Alex, armed with a business degree paid for by our parents, climbed the corporate ladder with ease. In contrast, I struggled through community college, juggling jobs to pay for my education, earning a degree in computer science through sheer grit and determination. It wasn't just in the realm of education or personal achievements that the inequality showed. Even in matters of the heart, I felt the sting of our parents' indifference. When I came out as gay at 22, the news was met with a stony silence from my parents and a cruel jibe from Alex about not wanting to share a room during family holidays for safety. The pain of that remark was sharper because it went unchallenged by our parents. Now, standing on the threshold of midlife, I find myself dredging up these memories not out of a desire to wallow in past grievances but because fate has presented a cruel irony. Alex, the brother who made my childhood a living hell, is now battling a terminal illness. To know more about my story, and why my brother got sick, let's go back about 2 months ago. I experienced one of the few moments in my life when I felt genuinely cared for and protected, but it came at a steep price: the death of my grandparents. Their passing marked a significant shift in my life, highlighting the contrast between their loving support and the glaring neglect from my parents. My grandparents had always been my sanctuary. Unlike my parents, who invariably showered my older brother with attention and gifts, my grandparents provided me with something far more profound: unconditional love and acceptance. They were aware of the imbalance in my family, and they did everything within their power to make me feel valued. Whenever I visited them, it was like stepping into a world where I was no longer invisible. They listened intently to my stories about school and my small achievements, which my parents often overlooked in favor of celebrating my brother's latest successes. Growing up, the difference in how my grandparents and my parents treated my brother and me was stark. Unlike my parents, who clearly favored my older brother, my grandparents showered both of us with love and affection, though it always felt like they made an extra effort to compensate for the imbalance at home. My grandparents were the kind of people who believed in fairness and equality. They often tried to gently advise my parents to treat us equally, hoping to bridge the gap that was so apparent. "Treat the boys fairly, they both deserve your love and support," they would say in their calm, wise tones. Despite these conversations, which I overheard more than once, my parents' behavior remained unchanged. Their favoritism towards my brother was as clear as ever, and their ears seemed closed to any suggestion of impartiality. The love from my grandparents was demonstrated in their actions and the small everyday moments. They were always present at my school events, cheering just as loudly for me as for my brother, if not louder, to make up for my parents' often lukewarm enthusiasm for my achievements. On birthdays, they went out of their way to make sure my gifts and cake were just as grand as what my brother received, if not more so, to subtly balance the scales. Their passing was not only a profound loss of love and support, but also marked the end of the only advocacy I had within my family. It underscored just how much they had done to protect and elevate me, efforts that were both subtle and significant. They knew the challenges I faced and tried in their own ways to shield me, even if it meant standing up to their own children. The day we lost them was a quietly tragic one. They had been involved in a minor car accident, but due to their frail health, they couldn't recover. It happened too quickly, and suddenly, I was left without my pillars of emotional support. At the funeral, while everyone else seemed to be whispering about wills and legacies, I was engulfed in a deep sense of loss, mourning not just their death but the unconditional love they took with them. The reading of the will was a somber affair, and it was there that I learned about the final act of protection my grandparents had orchestrated for me. To everyone's surprise, they had left me their house and a substantial sum of money: $500,000. It was an unexpected turn of events that caused a stir among my relatives, particularly my parents, who had expected that everything would go to my brother, as it always had. However, the most dramatic revelation was yet to come. My grandparents had always known about the preferential treatment my brother received and the manipulative tendencies of my parents. To protect me further and perhaps teach everyone a lesson about values and deception, they had included a peculiar clause about another sum of money. This was the money my brother believed he was receiving. A hefty amount supposedly hidden in a special envelope. But in reality, this envelope contained nothing but monopoly money. I remember that moment. My parents, who had always shown blatant favoritism towards him, practically glowed with vicarious satisfaction. Their joy was palpable, as if they themselves had won some grand lottery. They whispered excitedly among themselves, already planning how this windfall would bolster our family's finances. Perhaps they did not consider, but secretly hoped, that my brother would share some of his newfound wealth with them. But the joy of the moment was tainted for me. Standing on the periphery, I watched my brother's face light up with greedy anticipation as he tore open the envelope. His voice, dripping with condescension and unearned triumph, cut through the merriment like a knife. Finally, something to show for all my patience with this family, he smirked, his eyes not meeting mine, as if I were beneath his notice. It wasn't enough that he had received what should have been my share as well, he had to twist the knife. Guess this means I can finally get away from all this. Especially you, he sneered, his gaze flicking over me dismissively. The sting of his words was sharp, made all the more painful by my then ignorance that the money was fake. At the time, I believed he had received a real fortune, a fortune that could have transformed my life, which had been anything but privileged compared to his. The dreams I had nurtured in secret, of freedom, of modest comfort, of simply being seen as equal, seemed to crumble before my eyes. I felt a deep sinking regret, not only for the loss of what I thought was my last chance at a better life, but for the bitter divide that money had reinforced between us. His words about my identity were perhaps the most cutting. Ever since I had come out as non-binary, my brother had used every opportunity to belittle and insult me, as if my existence challenged his overly traditional views. "Don't expect me to waste any of this cleaning up your messes," he'd say scornfully, using the wrong pronouns deliberately to sting. "Imagine being so desperate to be different, you end up like that." His mockery was a clear reflection of the disdain he felt, mirroring the less overt but equally painful dismissal by our parents. To everyone's surprise, especially our parents, my brother did not linger to celebrate his windfall. The very next day, he packed up, his actions as cold and calculated as his departure. He moved in with his girlfriend, who, unbeknownst to him, was more interested in his supposed financial status than in him as a person. Our parents, left in the wake of his sudden departure, were stunned. All those years of prioritizing him, of bending family dynamics to favor him, had culminated not in grateful reciprocation but in abandonment. Their faces, once flushed with excitement, now mirrored the betrayal they felt, a bitter realization that their golden child had fled the nest with no intention of looking back. However, the truth revealed itself dramatically. Days later, in the wake of my brother's sudden departure to his girlfriend's place, I received a call from him, the first in what would be a series of frantic, increasingly humbled communications. The money was fakey, monopoly money, precisely placed in a real bank envelope. A bitter laughter escaped me as I listened to his choked fury over the phone. The girlfriend, driven by material aspirations, had unceremoniously kicked him out upon discovering the deceit. My brother, now homeless and humiliated, was suddenly devoid of both the financial windfall he had bragged about and the companion he had chosen over his family. This revelation did not soften my heart. Rather, it crystallized the resentment that had been simmering for years. When he showed up at my door, his face a mix of anger and desperation, I felt a cold resolve wash over me. This was the brother who had tormented me throughout my childhood, who had stood by and watched, or instigated, as others did the same. This was the brother who had never once stood up for me, not when I was bullied for being different, not when I struggled to find my place in the world. When my brother showed up at my doorstep, it wasn't a simple knock of desperation. It was the culmination of a series of events that had unfolded since he'd been duped by the monopoly money our grandparents had cleverly disguised as his inheritance. According to what he told me, before he decided to come here, he had gone to our parents' house seeking refuge and possibly some financial support. However, the reception he received there was far from what he had hoped. Our parents had always preferred him over me, showering him with attention and gifts throughout our childhood. Yet, when he appeared on their doorstep in his hour of need, they turned him away. They believed he had squandered the money, or what he thought was money, on lavish expenditures or perhaps on his girlfriend, who was notorious for her interest in material wealth. He explained that our parents accused him of lying about the money being fake. They thought he was just making up stories to get more financial aid from them. The disappointment was evident in their voices. They felt betrayed that he had not only moved out so abruptly after receiving his inheritance, but had also neglected them since moving in with his girlfriend. In their eyes, he had chosen his new life over family, only to return when he was in trouble. At that time I was staying at our grandparents' house. I was taking care of the house, living quietly away from the drama that often surrounded my parents and brother. The house was a sanctuary from the childhood memories of neglect and favoritism that still haunted me. When my brother recounted his ordeal, there was a part of me that felt a twinge of sympathy. Here he was, the favored child, who had never once considered the impact of his actions or words on others, particularly me, now reduced to seeking help from the sibling he had often ridiculed and scorned. His fall from grace was steep, and his current predicament was a harsh lesson in humility. However, the years of being second best, of enduring his cruel taunts and our parents' obvious partiality, had hardened my heart considerably. He spoke of our parents' rejection with a tone of surprise and hurt, as if it was unthinkable that they would ever turn their backs on him. It was ironic, really, considering how often he had done the same to me, both as a child and as an adult. His narrative was filled with regret and a sense of urgency, but it lacked genuine remorse for the way he had treated me over the years. It seemed he was more upset about his loss of comfort and status than about the possibility of mending our fractured relationship. As he stood there, looking more vulnerable than I had ever seen him, I was faced with a choice. Could I set aside the years of neglect, the memories of birthdays and Christmases where I watched him open presents that should have been mine, the harsh words, and the dismissive attitudes? Was I capable of forgiving not just him, but also our parents, who had instilled such disparity between us? I listened quietly, my mind racing with memories and emotions. In the end, my response was shaped not just by the hurt of the past but by the realization of what I needed to do to protect my own peace. I had built a life for myself here in our grandparents' house, a life away from the constant reminders of my secondary place in our family. Years have passed since I shut the door on my brother, and in that time, the details of his life have faded into a distant haze. I don't know where he lives, nor have I kept up with his goings-on. That is, until today, when a sudden text message broke the silence between us, tearing open old wounds with news of his illness. He was sick, battling a brain tumor, and frequently in and out of the hospital. He couldn't afford the surgery fees and was reaching out for help. The message was brief, almost clinical. But it struck a chord deep within me. It was not just a request for financial aid. It was a plea for familial support. The kind he had denied me throughout our childhood and well into our adult lives. Memories of our past, of his harsh words and cruel actions, surged back with unwelcome clarity. He had always been the favored son, the golden child who received the latest gadgets and unwavering affection from our parents, while I lingered in the shadows, the afterthought in their familial narrative. Now, as he lay in a hospital bed, vulnerable and reaching out, those same feelings wrestled within me once again. Could I deny him help when he was possibly facing the end of his life? Was my resentment so deep that I could look away from a dying man, my own brother, regardless of our torrid past? As I pondered over his request, the scenes of our childhood played in my mind like a melancholy film. There were moments when he could have stood up for me, moments when he could have shared, moments when he could have simply been the brother I needed him to be. But those moments never came. Instead, there were insults, there were dismissals, and above all, there was the clear message that I was less than him, unworthy of the same love and attention he received so freely. His words from our last encounter echoed in my memory. Where were you when I was being bullied? Where were you when I lost my job? Where were you when I got married to my husband? Each question is a stark reminder of his absence, of his choice to exclude me, to ridicule me for who I was. And now, he needed me. Now, when everyone else had turned their backs, when his charm and money had run out, he remembered that he had a brother. I sat with the weight of his request, feeling the old wounds bleed anew. Was I a bad person for hesitating, for wanting to turn him away as he had done to me? Perhaps. But forgiveness is a complex dance, one that requires more than desperation to lead its steps. As I wrestled with my conscience, I realized that my decision would not just define his fate but would shape the narrative of who I wanted to be in the face of such profound betrayal. In the end, I chose to respond. My message was simple, devoid of the bitterness that had colored our last encounter. I hope you find the help you need, I wrote. It was neither a commitment, nor a refusal, but a boundary set firmly in place. I could not erase the past, nor could I rewrite the hurt that had been inflicted. But I could choose how to move forward, not with malice or resentment, but with the quiet dignity of someone who had learned to value themselves in the absence of familial love. As I sent the message, a sense of relief washed over me. I had responded not out of spite, but from a place of strength. Whether he would interpret it as an act of compassion or indifference did not concern me. I had offered what I could, a gesture of peace to ease my conscience and perhaps mend a bridge long left in disrepair. In stepping back, I found my peace, realizing that being a good person doesn't always mean having to fix everything. Sometimes, it simply means doing what you can, with respect for yourself and the history that shaped you. You know, one thing that happened that I could have predicted was my parents' reaction when they found out I refused to help my brother. Their first approach was through a series of phone calls. I recognized the familiar numbers flashing on my phone's screen, and I knew immediately that answering would lead to nothing but a rehash of old grievances and criticisms. So, I chose silence, letting the calls go unanswered. But silence was not a strong enough barrier, it merely postponed the confrontation. One afternoon, I heard the determined knocking at my door. Reluctantly, I opened it to find my parents standing there, their faces a mix of anger and desperation. The initial exchange was as bitter as I had anticipated. "How could you turn your back on your own brother at a time like this?" my father began, his voice thick with disapproval. My mother chimed in, her words laced with a familiar disdain. And to think we raised you better, even with your choices. The slight pause before choices, and the emphasis thereafter made it clear she was referring to my sexuality, a topic they had never fully accepted. As the minutes dragged on, their anger seemed to dissolve somewhat into a pleading desperation. He's your brother. He needs your help, my mother implored, her eyes welling up with tears, not just for my brother, I suspected, but for the shattered image of a united family she held dear. I stood firm, though not without inner turmoil. Look, I started, my voice steadier than I felt. I understand he's in a tough spot, but why am I always the one expected to make sacrifices? Where was this family unity when I needed support? When I was bullied, ignored, marginalized? There was no satisfying answer to those questions, and we all knew it. The room filled with a tense silence, a tacit acknowledgement of the many times they had failed to stand by me. Then the conversation turned to the house and the inheritance left by my grandparents, the only real support I had known. My parents knew about the house my grandparents had bequeathed me, intended as a safeguard and a gesture of love, acknowledging the imbalance I had endured throughout my life. It's a large sum, and the house is valuable. Selling it could easily cover his medical expenses, my father suggested, eyeing me as if gauging my reaction. I sighed, feeling the weight of the decision. This house is more than just property to me. It's a memorial of the only people who ever made me feel valued and loved. It's not just a matter of money, it's about preserving the one good thing I inherited from a past filled with inequality, I explained, hoping they would understand the depth of what they were asking me to relinquish. The plea turned into more whining and bargaining, but I saw through the desperation to the same old patterns. My parents wanted a resolution that would ease their guilt and discomfort, without true consideration for what it would cost me, both emotionally and financially. I'm at a crossroads, truly. Part of me wants to rise above the past hurts and help my brother, who, despite everything, is in genuine need. Yet, another part of me resists, fueled by years of being sidelined and undervalued. This house, my refuge, symbolizes so much more than a financial asset. It represents my grandparents' recognition of my worth and their desire to protect me even in death. So here I am, asking for your opinion, torn between the desire to be better than what I endured and the need to protect the legacy that is truly mine. What should I do? Boyfriend found out how much money I have. He wants me to pay off a house for us, buy a new car, and fund a trip for him to go abroad. Should I end it? In the heart of a bustling Canadian city, nestled among the clamor and chaos, there lay a small modest apartment that seemed almost misplaced amidst the towering skyscrapers. This was my sanctuary, a place painstakingly curated to embody the values of simplicity and tranquility that I held dear. My name is Mary, and at 28 years old, I had crafted a life quite different from the opulent one I left behind in Italy. Here, in this understated nook, I found peace. The apartment was a one-bedroom affair, with walls painted a soft creamy white that caught the gentle morning light. The furniture was minimal, a comfortable couch, a sturdy coffee table, and a small dining set that had seen better days but still stood strong. The decoration was sparse, with a few carefully chosen pieces that spoke more of sentiment than of monetary value. A small balcony overlooked a quiet street, where the sounds of the city were muted, just enough for me to enjoy my morning coffee in relative peace. Living here, my needs were few, and my desires even fewer. I had learned early on that happiness doesn't come from things, but from experiences, from quiet moments spent reading a book, from laughter shared with a friend, from the soothing ritual of brewing tea. My job as a digital marketing consultant afforded me the luxury of working from home, allowing me to shape my days as I saw fit. This life of minimalism was a deliberate choice, a stark contrast to the lavish, almost grandiose lifestyle of my family back in Italy. My parents and extended family lived in sprawling estates in the countryside, surrounded by vineyards and olive groves, their homes adorned with art and antiques that spoke of generations of wealth and culture. My childhood was filled with long, languid summers under the Italian sun, dinners that stretched into the wee hours, and conversations filled with passionate gestures. It was beautiful, yes, but overwhelming. A life where every moment felt orchestrated, every smile a bit too polished. It was during my university years in Canada that I began to shed the weight of those golden shackles. I embraced a life where I could be just Mary, not the heiress, not the future custodian of centuries-old oil paintings or rare manuscripts. Here, I was free to build a life that resonated with who I truly was, not who I was expected to be. Enter James, my boyfriend of 3 years, a Canadian native like myself in age but vastly different in experience. James came from a middle-class family, his life a tapestry of hard work and modest achievements. He was kind-hearted, with a gentle demeanor that belied his rugged exterior. When we met, It was as if pieces of a puzzle had fallen into place. We shared similar interests in music, loved the outdoors, and both cherished the quiet moments of life. His respect for my simple lifestyle only deepened my affection for him. James never knew about the wealth I had left behind. It was a part of me that I kept hidden, not out of shame, but out of necessity. I feared that revealing my family's wealth might introduce a wedge between us, that it might make him feel inadequate, or shift the dynamics of our relationship in ways I couldn't control. I wanted to be loved for who I was, not for the assets I would one day inherit. In my heart, I believed that preserving this secret was for the best, protecting both James's self-esteem and the purity of our connection. Our relationship was built on the foundations of mutual respect and shared values. We spent our weekends exploring local markets, cooking meals together, or watching old movies curled up on the couch. It was a peaceful, fulfilling existence, and for a while, I believed it would always be this way. But life, as it often does, had other plans. The catalyst came unexpectedly, in the form of an invitation to a family reunion back in Italy. It was an event I couldn't avoid, my grandmother's 80th birthday, a milestone that demanded my presence. As the date approached, the thought of bringing James along filled me with both excitement and dread. I was eager for him to see the country I loved, to experience the warmth of my family. Yet, I was terrified of how he might react when faced with the reality of my background. With a heavy heart, I booked our tickets, telling myself that it was time to face whatever consequences might come. As we packed our bags and prepared for the journey, I felt the weight of my secret heavier than ever. Little did I know, this trip would unravel the delicate threads of our relationship, exposing not only the truths I had hidden, but also the vulnerabilities we both carried. What lay ahead was a test of love and trust, one that would redefine the future of our relationship forever. The plane descended slowly through the cottony clouds, revealing glimpses of the lush Italian countryside, a stark contrast to the sprawling urbanity of Toronto. As the wheels touched down on the runway, a surge of nostalgia washed over me. Italy was not just my birthplace, it was a repository of my earliest and most cherished memories. Beside me, James peered eagerly out of the window, his face lit with the excitement of a child. This was his first time traveling outside North America, and his enthusiasm was palpable. We navigated through the airport with our luggage rolling behind us, the chatter of Italian filling the air like a familiar melody. I could feel James's curiosity bubbling as he tried to catch phrases and words, his eyes wide with fascination. As we stepped outside, my uncle Luca was waiting for us, his arms wide open, a broad smile spreading across his face. "Benvenuti," he exclaimed, enveloping me in a warm embrace before turning to James with a firm handshake. "And you must be James. Mary has told us so much about you." James chuckled nervously, exchanging pleasantries in his halting Italian, which he had been practicing for weeks before our trip. As we drove away from the airport, the landscape transformed from urban sprawl to verdant vineyards and rolling hills dotted with olive trees. The beauty of my homeland unfolded before us, each turn and dip revealing vistas more breathtaking than the last. Our destination was my grandmother's estate in Tuscany, a place that seemed suspended in time. The house, a sprawling villa built in the Renaissance style, was perched atop a hill, overlooking acres of vineyards. Its ochre walls glowed under the setting sun, and ivy climbed generously over its ancient stones. It was a stark embodiment of the wealth and history of my family, a visual testament to a legacy that stretched back generations. As we pulled up the gravel driveway, the sound of the tires crunching underfoot, James's expression turned from excitement to awe. "Mary, this place is incredible," he whispered, as if speaking too loudly might shatter the moment. "I grew up playing in those vineyards," I said, pointing towards the green expanse. "And every stone of this house has a story." The grandeur of the villa was overwhelming even for me, who had seen it countless times before. As we entered, the vastness of the entrance hall with its high ceilings and portraits of stern ancestors, seemed to impress upon James the reality of my heritage. The house was alive with the sounds of preparation. The reunion was to be a grand affair, with relatives coming from all over the country. During the following days, James was introduced to a lifestyle so vastly different from our simple contained existence in Canada. Each meal was a feast, each conversation a boisterous symphony of voices. My relatives, adorned in fine clothes and speaking with an effortless elegance, moved through the rooms with a grace that belonged to a different era. James tried to blend in, his usual confidence replaced by a quiet, observant demeanor. I watched him as he interacted with my family, his eyes often wide with a mix of admiration and incredulity. It was during a grand dinner, under the chandeliers of the grand dining room, that I first noticed a subtle shift in his attitude. "Everyone here seems to have their life figured out," he remarked quietly as we watched my cousins animatedly discussing politics and art. "It's like they're playing a game where everyone knows the rules except me." I squeezed his hand, trying to offer reassurance. "They've just had more practice at this kind of thing," I whispered back. As the days passed, the initial shock of the opulence gave way to a budding curiosity. James's questions grew more pointed, his interest in the specifics of my family's wealth more pronounced. "So, how does it all work?" he asked one evening as we walked through the vineyard, the sunset casting long shadows on the ground. "Who inherits what? How do you manage it all?" It was a discussion I had hoped to avoid, but there, amidst the rows of grapevines, I found myself opening up about trusts, management, and the responsibilities that came with such inheritance. James listened intently, nodding as I explained, but I could see the wheels turning in his head, the calculations forming behind his eyes. The remainder of our stay was marked by a series of such revelations. Whether it was the casual display of an antique vase worth more than our apartment, or the old family jewels that came out for a cousin's wedding, each instance seemed to embed a small wedge between us. James's demeanor evolved from one of simple curiosity to something tinged with a hint of entitlement. The boundaries of our relationship, once so clearly defined by mutual respect and simplicity, began to blur as notions of what could be started to infiltrate his thoughts. By the time we were preparing to leave, the air between us had thickened with unspoken words and unasked questions. The drive back to the airport was quiet, a reflective silence that seemed to hold the weight of our shared experiences. As the Italian countryside receded into the distance, I couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding. The trip had not only exposed my wealth but had also unearthed the fragility of our bond. We returned to Canada carrying more than just our suitcases. We brought back a changed dynamic. A new awareness that would soon test the very foundation of our relationship. The seeds of doubt and change sown during those sunny days in Italy were poised to grow into challenges that neither of us could have anticipated. The return to our modest apartment in Canada felt jarring after the lavish expanses of my ancestral Italian villa. As James and I unpacked our suitcases, there was an unspoken understanding that something fundamental had shifted between us during our trip. The light-hearted laughter that had once filled our space seemed dulled, replaced by a pensive quietude that neither of us dared to disturb. In the days following our return, James's behavior began to subtly change. It started with small comments, offhand remarks about, "when we have a bigger place," or, "our future home." At first I thought these were just aspirational dreams, a way for him to process the grandeur we'd witnessed. However, it soon became clear that his views on our financial dynamics had shifted dramatically. One evening, while I was preparing dinner, James broached the subject of real estate. "I saw a listing today," he mentioned casually, his eyes fixed on his phone. "A house, not too far from here. 3 bedrooms, a garden. It's perfect for us." His tone was light, but the implication was heavy with expectation. I paused, a stir of apprehension in my gut. "James, we've talked about this. I'm happy here. We don't need a big house." He looked up, surprise etching his features. "But why settle for this when we can afford so much more? It's about time we lived like we deserve." His words struck a nerve. It wasn't just the presumption of we when he really meant my money, but also his sudden entitlement to a lifestyle he had never contributed to building. Over the following weeks, these conversations became more frequent. James started to bring up luxury cars, expensive vacations, and even investment opportunities. Each suggestion was grander than the last, each plan more elaborate, anchored firmly on the financial security he assumed we, or rather, I, possessed. The strain began to manifest in other ways too. Social gatherings, once a source of joy, turned into platforms for James to hint at our upgraded lifestyle. At a friend's birthday party, he openly discussed our future trips to Europe and the type of car we should buy next. Each claim felt like a chip away at the privacy and principles I held dear. This transformation in James's demeanor placed me in an emotional conundrum. Here was the man I loved. The man who had once cherished our simple life together, now morphed into someone who saw my inheritance as a stepping stone to material indulgences. It was as if the man I knew had been replaced by a stranger with a distorted sense of entitlement. As his plans grew more detailed, our discussions turned into disagreements. One night, as we lay in bed, the tension that had been brewing finally boiled over. "James, where is all this coming from?" I asked, my voice a mix of sadness and frustration. "Why has everything changed since we came back from Italy?" He turned to look at me, his expression a blend of defiance and confusion. "Changed? Mary, I'm thinking about our future. Your money could give us the life we've always wanted." "But at what cost?" I countered. "You're planning our life as if my money is ours. But it isn't, James. It's mine, and it comes with responsibilities and decisions that you're not considering." The room went silent, the weight of our words hanging between us. James's face softened, and for a moment, I saw a glimmer of the man I had fallen in love with. "I just want us to have the best," he whispered. "I might have gotten carried away, but it's only because I want to build something great with you." Despite his reassurances, the seed of doubt had been planted. The following days were a testament to the changed dynamics in our relationship. James's approach had altered subtly. Where once there was partnership, there now lay a transactional expectation. It was not just about sharing a life but about leveraging my wealth for a lifestyle that he now deemed essential. The practical implications of this shift were significant. Financial discussions, once rare and collaborative, became fraught with tension. Planning for the future was no longer about our dreams and goals, but about managing expectations and defending boundaries. I never thought I'd have to deal with him. My financial independence, a source of pride and empowerment, had become a battleground. Moreover, this shift affected how I viewed our relationship's foundation. Trust and respect, once given freely and reciprocally, now required constant negotiation and reassurance. The egalitarian nature of our partnership, which had been one of its strengths, was compromised. I found myself second-guessing not just decisions about money but the motivations behind James's affections and plans. This evolving dynamic also brought with it an emotional toll. There were moments of profound loneliness, times when I felt misunderstood and cornered. The joy that had once colored our daily life together was now occasionally marred by a palpable tension, making our interactions stilted, our conversations careful. In moments of solitude, I questioned the sustainability of our relationship. Could love endure when it was shadowed by financial imbalance and expectations? Was there a way to reclaim the simplicity and sincerity that had once defined us? These were questions that lingered in the quiet corners of our home, unanswered but increasingly urgent. As days turned into weeks, a palpable tension built between us. The air was thick with things unsaid and wishes unexpressed. It was late one evening, as we sat side by side on our couch with the TV chattering idly in the background, that the facade of normalcy finally cracked. "Mary, why don't we consider moving? Somewhere bigger, maybe even start looking at houses?" James ventured cautiously, his voice tinged with a hesitancy that was unlike him. I turned to look at him, really look at him, and saw not just the man I loved but also the growing divide between us. "James, why would we do that? This place. It's enough for us, isn't it? Hasn't it always been?" He shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my gaze. "Well, yes. But don't you think we deserve a bit more? I mean, your family lives so differently. Aren't you ever tempted?" The question hung between us, dense and daunting. I sighed deeply, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on us. "James, I grew up around all that excess. And yes, it's beautiful. But it's not what makes me happy. I've chosen this life with you because it's what feels right for me. Not because I can't afford any differently." "But it's not about what we can afford, Mary," he countered, his voice rising slightly in frustration. "It's about what you can afford, and honestly, isn't it a bit wasteful not to use it?" His words stung, the implication clear and cutting. I felt a coldness seep into the space between us, chilling the warmth we had cultivated over our years together. "Is that how you see it, James? My family's money is a resource for us to tap into whenever we feel like it? Because that's not how I view it. That money, it comes with strings, with expectations and responsibilities that you don't understand." James looked taken aback, his expression softening. "I didn't mean it like that, Mary. I just thought." "What? That suddenly because my family has money, our plans, our dreams should change?" My voice was sharper than I intended, edged with a bitterness that tasted foreign on my tongue. He paused, the air thick with our unsaid thoughts, before he reached for my hand, his touch tentative. "I'm sorry, Mary. I suppose I got carried away. It's just all so new to me. I never thought I'd be close to someone with so much possibility." I pulled my hand gently from his grasp, needing the space to gather my thoughts. "James, my family's wealth isn't what I want our life to be about. I love our life, our home, just as it is. I don't want that to change because of money." He nodded slowly, his eyes meeting mine with a sincerity that punctured the tension. "I understand. Or at least I'll try to. I love you, Mary. I love this life we've built. I don't want to lose it over fantasies of something that might not even make us happy." It was then I realized how deeply entangled our dreams had become with the reality of my heritage. We sat together, the distance between us filled with the echo of our words, slowly finding our way back to each other. "I'm sorry for pushing," James murmured after a long silence, his voice low. "I'll respect your feelings about this. We can go as slow as you need. Let's just keep living our life, our way." I nodded, feeling a fragile peace settle over us. It was a temporary resolution, a band-aid over a wound that needed more than just promises to heal. But it was a start, a recognition of our mutual desire to preserve what we had, even in the face of tempting possibilities. As we turned back to the flickering light of the TV, a small smile passed between us, a silent acknowledgement of the complexities of love and wealth, and the simple truth that sometimes, holding on to what you value most requires letting go of what the world tells you should matter. Update. The weeks following our muted confrontation were a study in fragile normalcy. James and I navigated our days with a cautious tenderness, each of us aware of the unspoken fissures slowly spreading beneath the surface of our relationship. I believed, perhaps naively, that we could mend what had been strained by the revelations of wealth and differing desires. But the real test of our bond was yet to come. A test that would shatter the tentative peace we had brokered. The betrayal came on an unexpectedly warm evening, at a gathering hosted by a close friend. It was the kind of casual event we had attended countless times before, a backyard barbecue, where the smell of grilling mixed with laughter and music floated on the late summer air. James and I arrived together, hands linked, our smiles a bit too practiced, too ready. As the evening progressed, I noticed James slipping more comfortably into the crowd, his laughter a little louder, his gestures more expansive with every drink he consumed. I mingled too, but with a mind distracted by the watchful maintenance of my facade. It wasn't until I was by the makeshift bar, fetching us another round of drinks, that I overheard it. "No, you don't understand. Mary can afford way more than this. Her family is loaded. She's basically set for life," James was boasting, the words floating over to me, sharp and clear above the hum of party chatter. Frozen, drink in hand, my heart raced as I processed his words. A group of acquaintances around him laughed, someone whistling low in admiration. "Seriously man, that's wild. And here you are living in that tiny place?" Another voice chimed in, half joking, half serious. I felt the air leave my lungs in a whoosh, my presence at the bar suddenly suffocating. The casual betrayal, the ease with which James shared my most guarded secret, the very essence of my fears, was laid bare in those few flippant words. Navigating my way back to him, the cold grip of dread tightening around my heart, I intercepted his boisterous storytelling. "James, can I speak with you? In private?" My voice was calm, but it carried an edge, a signal not lost on him. His face changed as he followed me to a quiet corner of the yard, the mirth fading, replaced by a dawning realization of the gravity of his mistake. "Mary, Did you think it was your news to share?" I interrupted, the hurt making my words sharper, colder. "Did you think it wouldn't matter to me?" he stammered, a mix of alcohol and genuine remorse muddling his words. "I'm sorry. I didn't think it would be a big deal. I got carried away, and you decided my privacy, my trust wasn't worth respecting." I could hear the bitter disappointment in my own voice, a sound I never wanted to direct at him. "Mary, I made a mistake. Please, let's just go home and talk about this," he pleaded, reaching for my arm. I pulled away, my decision crystallizing with stark clarity. "No, James, we can't just talk it away this time. This isn't just a mistake. It's a betrayal." The rest of the evening was a blur of hushed apologies and quiet exits. We left separately, the ride home a solitary journey for each of us, filled with the echoing words of what had passed between us. That night, alone in the apartment we had shared, the walls seemed to close in on me. Each shared memory now tinged with the stain of betrayal. The breakup was as inevitable as the dawn. When James returned the next morning, his eyes hopeful yet wary, I knew what needed to be said. "I can't do this, James. Your actions last night showed me just how little you respect what I hold dear." "But Mary, everyone makes mistakes. I know I messed up, but I can fix this." "We can fix this," he insisted, desperation lacing his voice. "This wasn't just a slip, James. It was a choice. You chose to share something deeply personal about me, not out of love or necessity, but for entertainment. I can't build a life with someone who values their momentary status over our trust." His protests faded as the finality of my words settled between us. The breakup, though unilateral in declaration, was mutual in its necessity. We parted with a heavy silence, the kind that speaks louder than any words of farewell. In the days that followed, the fallout was both personal and social. Mutual friends, caught between allegiances, offered awkward condolences or curious probes masked as concern. I found solace in solitude, turning to my passion for painting, letting the colors express the turmoil that words could not. Each brushstroke was a step towards healing, a way to reclaim the peace that had been disrupted. The betrayal had not just ended a relationship, it had forced me to confront the vulnerabilities I had tried so hard to shield. But in that confrontation, there was growth. I learned that my values were not just preferences but necessities, the core of who I was and who I would continue to be, with or without someone by my side. As I painted, the hues blending on the canvas, I realized that this ending was not just an end, but a beginning. A chance to redefine my boundaries, to strengthen my resolve, and to ensure that my next chapter would be one where trust was not just given, but earned. The days after the party were a haze of conflicting emotions. I vacillated between anger and sadness, betrayal and a strange sense of liberation. The realization that James had so casually disclosed my family's wealth to people who had no business knowing gnawed at me. It wasn't just the fact that he had spoken out of turn, it was the casual disregard for my feelings, the thoughtlessness of his actions. Each time I replayed the scene in my head, my resolve hardened. I couldn't continue a relationship where such fundamental trust was so easily broken. I needed time to think, to process the gravity of what had happened. I spent hours walking through the city, the familiar streets providing a backdrop for my swirling thoughts. By the end of the third day, I knew what I had to do. When James returned home, he looked hopeful, as if expecting that time had softened my stance. I asked him to sit with me, our small living room suddenly feeling too large, too empty. "James, we need to talk," I began, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. He nodded, his eyes searching mine for a hint of reconciliation. "I know, Mary, I'm really sorry about what happened. I was drunk and stupid, but I didn't mean to hurt you." "I know you didn't mean to," I said, trying to keep my tone even. "But you did hurt me, deeply. What you did wasn't just a mistake. It was a breach of trust, something that's fundamental to any relationship." He looked down, the weight of my words settling in. "I understand that. And I promise it won't happen again. I'll do anything to make it right." I took a deep breath, bracing myself for the hardest part. "James, this isn't just about making it right. It's about the fact that you saw my family's wealth and it changed something in you. You started seeing my money as ours, and that's not what I want for my life." He looked up, a hint of desperation in his eyes. "So what are you saying? You want to end things over this?" "I'm saying that our relationship has been fundamentally altered by what's happened. I can't ignore that. I can't go back to the way things were because that trust is broken. And without trust, we have nothing." The silence that followed was heavy, each second stretching painfully. Finally, James nodded, his expression one of resigned sadness. "If that's what you really want, then I'll respect it. I'm truly sorry, Mary." I felt a tear escape, quickly wiping it away. "I know you are. And I'm sorry too. This isn't what I wanted, but it's what I need to do for myself." The days that followed were a blur of muted interactions and strained conversations. Friends who had been at the party reached out, some with genuine concern, others with a curiosity that felt invasive. I found myself navigating a delicate balance, explaining the situation without divulging too much, trying to protect my privacy even in the wake of its breach. Some friends were supportive, offering their shoulders to cry on and their ears to listen. Others seemed more interested in the gossip, their questions probing for details that felt too raw to share. It was a lonely time, despite the well-meaning gestures, as I struggled to find a way forward. I threw myself into my work, finding solace in the routine and the familiar tasks that required my full attention. Painting became my refuge. The act of creating something new. A therapeutic process that helped me process my emotions. Each stroke of the brush was a way to channel the pain, the disappointment, the anger. The canvas became a mirror of my inner turmoil, and as the days passed, the chaotic swirls of color slowly began to take form, reflecting my journey towards healing. I also started journaling, pouring my thoughts onto the pages, unfiltered and raw. It was a way to make sense of the tangled web of emotions, to understand the why and the how of what had happened. Writing became a nightly ritual, a time for reflection and self-discovery. Through these creative outlets, I began to reclaim my sense of self. The betrayal had left scars, but it also taught me valuable lessons about trust, boundaries, and the importance of protecting what mattered most to me. I emerged from the experience stronger, more resolute, and more determined to live a life defined by my values, not by the expectations or judgments of others. As time passed, the initial sting of the betrayal faded, replaced by a quieter, more profound understanding of what I needed in a relationship. I knew that the next time I opened my heart to someone, it would be with a clearer sense of my own worth and a firmer grip on the boundaries that protected my peace. In the end, the breakup was not just an end but a beginning. It marked the start of a new chapter in my life, one where I was more attuned to my own needs and more protective of my own happiness. It was a hard-won lesson, but one that I carried with me as I moved forward, ready to face whatever came next with a renewed sense of purpose and strength.